going to be talking about the law of agency. Now, this is a big chapter. Did you like this? Because we're going to talk about your role in our business, why people hire you. So one of the first questions that a lot of times our students bring up from the exams to say that they had a question asking, so what are the main reasons why people hire agents, right? And specifically real estate agents. Why? Because we're supposed to possess all the skills, all the knowledge, right? We're supposed to have all the information to help the clients, right? That's kind of the main reason that most people say, hey, this person is trained, that's his business, so he should know things, right? He's an expert in this business. So that's one of the reason that people hire the real estate agents. The other reason that they hire us is because of the geographical or other limitations. So if you have a rental property that is 5 hours away from where you live, then you probably not want to travel every single time to rent it or to sell it. You probably want to hire somebody from that specific area to help you out, right? That's just common sense. And the principal does not have time. So time is money. In this life, this is what we'll deal with, right? They always complain there's not enough time, and that's exactly why a lot of people say that's just too much hassle. Advertise it, fill with the contract, something that I'm not really sure what to do, right? So they like to hire real estate agents for that reason, right? So 3 main reasons, which are all common sense. So who can sell houses, or who can become an agent? Now, when we say the word agent, so when we just referring to agent, we're referring to any type of agency. So if you want to sell a house, then yes, you become a real estate agent. If you want to sell your friend's car, then that's a car salesperson. That could be an agent too. If you want to sign up somebody just because they have a talent and say, look, I want to be your agent, so can I represent you? That's also an agency. So there's so many different type of agents out there. So for the exams, and that's why my mortgage people and Strata people and property people, but you guys all taking the same chapter because they're still going to test you on this knowledge, who is an agent. So on this slide, they're referring to an agent based on the common law. So I'll say it again. This is a common law, the oldest law. And based on the common law, the oldest law that says an agent, it's somebody who has the authority to act on behalf of the other person. So basically, if I want to become your agent, I say, look, can I be your agent? And if you give me that authority, he says, sure, Yana, go ahead, represent me. Then I become your agent. Okay? So you have to get an authority. So somebody has to approve you and says, yes, you're allowed to act on my behalf. Okay? Based on the common law, it says, yes, you have to have an authority, and you also have to be not a crazy person. So if one day one of you, let's say if you're the agent and you're working with your seller and the seller proves that he's crazy, or if you prove that you were crazy that night, or you forget your pills, and your doctor calls the seller and says that person is not in sound of mind, right? He's not sound of mind. So he's not, he's crazy basically. So then the contract will be void. So as long as everybody's sound of mind, right? As long as they have the capacity, then they can act as an agent based on the common law. And the common law, which is the oldest law, also says that you don't even have to have a capacity to become an agent. So what does that mean? So they're trying to tell you that there is no age limitation here. So even an infant can act as an agent. Interesting, right? So based on the common law, it says you could be 15, you can be 17, you can be anything under 19, and you still have a capacity. As long as you have the authority and as long as you're not a crazy person, then you can act on somebody else's behalf and become their agent. Okay, so this is a common law. In real estate, what is the first rule that they tell you? What are the capacities to real estate? So in real estate, we have the Real Estate Service Act, the God of Real Estate, okay? The Act, RESA. And he says that one of the rules, if you want to sell something, if you want to buy something, if you want to make a commission, right, in British Columbia, if you're planning to charge people money, then you need to have that capacity. So capacity for the real estate agent, right? You need to be over 19, you have to be good reputation, so that's your capacity. So they kind of add in extra on top of the common law, okay? So yes, you cannot provide any services on behalf of your clients if you're planning to charge them any commissions, okay? So pretty straightforward. Okay, so who is, because in this chapter, we're going to talk about your sellers and buyers and people you're working for and people that you don't work for, and they're going to be naming them different names. So you have to know who is who. For some people, it's going to make common sense everything, but for some people, they might not understand this language, right? So when we say principal, that is the person you're going to be working for. That is your client, okay? So if I'm coming to you and say, can I become your agent? And you say, sure, Yana, represent me. I said, you have such a great voice. I love it. I'm going to be your agent and we're going to make you famous, okay? So principal is the person that you're working with. That's your client, okay? So I'll be your agent, you'll be my client, okay? So that's what's happening here. The third party is somebody who's outside of the transaction. Okay, it could be anybody else outside of the contract between you and me. So if I give you the same example, but in regards to real estate, so if I'm planning to sell your house, then yes, I will be your listing agent working with you. You will be my principal, right? I can call you seller too, but you are my client. And let's say if the buyers come and look at your property, then they will be a third party to transaction, right? So I'm not representing them. They're just out there, right? I can talk to them on your behalf, but they're not my client. So they are the third party to this transaction. Or if you are planning to sell a house, or if you are looking for the house, right? So you are the buyer and you want me to find a house for you, then you're still my principal. Yes, you are the buyer, but you're still my principal. And the sellers will be the third party. So the third party is somebody outside of, it's not your client basically, right? Okay, you don't represent them. So let's look at question 1, because on the exam they like to give you at least one question about the capacity by itself. And when they talk about the capacity, make sure that you understand that they're not referring to the Real Estate Service Act capacity, right? They're referring to any type of agency out there. Okay, so let's see what they're asking you for. Which of the following statements is false with respect in regards to an agent? Do you see how they say the word an agent? They're not referring to the real estate agent, they're referring to any type of agency. Let's look at the option. An infant may act as an agent. Okay, based on the common law, yeah, sure. You can act as an agent, that's okay. You don't have to be 19 years old, right? An additional limitation on the capacity for the real estate agents, now they talk about you, as opposed to the common law for the other industries, is that they must be licensed under the Real Estate Service Act. Okay, that's one of the capacities that they add by the Real Estate Service Act. So that is also a true statement. Okay, what are they looking for? They're looking for the full statement. Option 3, because the agent represents a party to the contract, to bind a principal and an agent, he or she also has to have a capacity to the contract on his or her own behalf. So in order for you, what they're trying to say here, in order for you to become an agent, you must have a capacity. They're not talking about the real estate agents in here. They're just talking about you and the principal. And if you want to represent your principal, you have to have a capacity. True, false? That's definitely a false statement, because you see what I mean? The capacity, if it's any type of agency, it doesn't have to happen. Because common law says, as long as you're not a crazy person, and as long as what? They give you the authority. Good. Then you can become an agent. So watch for this capacity thing. As I said on the exam, they'll give you at least one question here for sure. They don't skip this. So the agency relationship. So I kind of explained already, let's say if you are my seller and I want to represent you, then you become my principal. And if I list your house, then I will be a listing agent. Okay, so I'll be working with you. Now, because you want to list with me, you can say, Yana, here's my listing, here's my house listed, right? The listing does not belong to an agent. Okay, it never belongs to you. So for example, if I'm the one who's listing your house, that listing is not mine. So if I get hit by a car tomorrow, that listing will not stay with me. That listing will stay with my brokerage. So the real estate office that I work for, this is who the buyers or the sellers will be signing that contract with. Okay? So your clients, your principal, will be signing the contract with your office, and they will designate you as an agent. So they will appoint that listing to you and says, okay, you can sell that house now. But you're selling it on behalf of the brokerage. So remember we talked about it so many times. Is that your buyer? Is that your seller? And we always see always the same answer. No, it's never yours. Okay? So yes, if you get hit by a car tomorrow, those listings and those buyers that you were working with, they still belong to your brokerage. And then they can just take those listings and designate it to anybody in the office. Okay? That's what they can do. So just know that when they sign that listing contract, agents, we're not part of any contracts. Right? We are the matchmakers. We match them up. Right? That's what we get paid for. Apparently, we are in the matching services. Right? So as long as we match them up, as long as the transaction closes, that's when your brokerage pays you that commission. Okay, so that's how it usually works. So it's not your clients, right? And you're not part of the contracts. So that real estate agent, if he signs the document, let's say principal, let's say that, so he's working with the buyers in this case. Okay, the buyer says, can you help us to find a house? Okay, so he will be working as a selling agent. I know it sounds funny, but when you work with the buyers, you're the selling agent working with your clients, and those clients will be your principals. In this case, buyers are his principals. Now, when they sign, let's say, any contracts, those contracts are not going to be between him and the buyers. Those contracts are going to be between usually between the buyers and the sellers, right? But it's all going to be happening through the real estate office that he's working for. So hopefully it's nice and clear, as long as you know that you're not part of any contracts and the buyers and the sellers do not belong to you, they belong to your brokerage. Now look what happens, okay? So he's a designated agent, he's working for this office, and he's working with those buyers. Because he's working with those buyers, they are his principal, and they gave him the warranty of the authority. So warranty of the authority basically saying that the buyer is aware that this agent will represent them. So when he talks to the sellers, he has the rights to talk, he has the authority to talk on behalf of his buyers. So when somebody says, oh, you breached the warranty of the authority, right? That means you made some mistakes and you, I don't know, went over and above your authority. So you took more responsibilities that you could take, right? And you said something that you're not supposed to say. So when they say warranty of the authority, that's a good thing. So that means you are having the authorities and the buyer's aware of this. And then you're going to represent those buyers and you can talk to the sellers on behalf of those buyers, right? So you can kind of be in between. So promise guarantee when he gives it to the sellers in this case, it will be on behalf of the buyers, right? So that's what they mean by the warranty of the authority. So is the agent part of the sale? Yes or no? We are the matchmakers. We match them up, but we're not part of the sale at all. That's it. Question number 2. When an agent acting with the scope of his authority and having disclosed that he's acting as an agent enters into the contract with a third party, the parties to the contracts are. Just because you have the authority, okay, and you enter into when they say agent enters into the contract with a third party, right? So like this guy enters, he basically writes a contract on behalf of the buyers. Is the agent part of the contract? Yes or no? Agents were never part of any contracts. We just match them up. That's all we do. So when they ask you who are the parties to the contract, I don't care how they rephrase the question on you, the answer is always the same. Never an agent. So if I look at any option, if I see there's an agent, there's an agent, there's an agent, I'll already know it has to be a false statement because we just help them, right? But that's all we do. So the principal, right, the person that you're working for, your client, and the third party. So that would be in this case buyers and the sellers. Okay? Crucial to remember. They always will test you in this exam. Always. So the fiduciary duty. We talked about it in so many different chapters before this, right? But when I say fiduciary duty, that's the highest duty of care that you provide to your clients. Should you be loyal? I think you should say yes. Should you give a full disclosure to your clients? I hope you said yes. And so that's called a fiduciary duty. Do the best for your clients. Don't look for your personal interest. I need to make a commission here, so let's just close you. I just buy something for you. That's not fiduciary. So the fiduciary is the highest duty of care that you can provide to your clients, right? Full disclosure, loyalty. That's what they're referring to, right? So a person who holds a position of trust with respect to someone else and is obligated to act solely in the other person's benefit. So that's kind of the point. It's not about you. It's about your client. So you don't need to know that definition, but you need to know this. On exam, they testing you about this overreaching umbrella. and they will ask you for this. So like, what is this? What is this overreaching umbrella fiduciary duty thing? As long as you remember what fiduciary duty stands for, then you'll get the answer. So anything to do with overreaching umbrella, just think of it as you as an umbrella on top of your client. Think of loyalty. So the answers that they're looking for when they talk about this umbrella is the loyalty. So any answer that talks about the loyalty, that's the one you want to be choosing. Okay. So the key purpose of an agent, they just kind of, so you know what they're referring to, right? Get the best results for their clients. Okay. Act solely for the benefit of your principal, of your client, put the principal interest ahead, right? Duty of the confidentiality, so that means keep it confidential. Work is work, business, home is home. Duty to avoid conflict of interest, right? So we'll talk about this a lot, but because right now this information for every of you guys, mortgage people included, so we'll go into details a bit later for my real estate people, okay? But the conflicts, right? So putting their own interest first. So that's kind of what the problem is, right? You can never say, but this is better for me, right? As an agent, let's get a faster closing. I want to get that commission faster. You can't do that because if it's not good for your clients, then that you just breach this fiduciary duty thing, right? So the breach of the fiduciary duty may also result in a discipline hearing. So if anybody come up to you and says, you know what, I don't think my agent acted on my best interest, then they can come after you basically, and they can give you that slap in the face, right? So you have your boss, right? So that they can come after you, right? And the financial service authority, so the BCFSA, that's the boss now for every of you guys, mortgage, real estate, right? Strata people, all of you guys will have exact same boss. So he can give you that discipline hearing. He can make you pay for that hearing, right? But that's what usually happens. So we're going to talk about how do you create the authorities itself. So how do we actually create, how do we get into that relationship basically, right, with our clients? So sometimes we know when we get into the relationship, and sometimes it just happens and you're like, am I in a relationship with that client? So this is what they want to teach you. So for the example, in real life, the best relationship is when it's all expressed. Expressed in a contract, when you sign a contract with your clients, when it's a mutual understanding, what's going to happen, that's called an express relationship. They can call it express contract, express relationship, whatever they want to call it. But as long as you see the word express, that's what we're looking for. This is what we want. And without this, we cannot list anything on the MLS system, right? You need to have a contract with your client where all the terms expressed in the contract, so you know exactly what will happen and when would it happen, right? So that's what we want. So again, that's how kind of you create those authorities over, like, you be able to go and unlock the property and show it to your clients, right? So if you have the express authority to do that, then that's easy, right? It's easy to show the property when you have those type of authorities. Okay. Sometimes you get into a relationship, right? You get that authority from your clients by the implied agency. Now, the implied sometimes happens without you even knowing that. And this is where they want you to understand that this is not good. It usually happens when you're working with unrepresented buyers, right? So let's say you're doing an open house. This is your listing. I mean, your brokerage listing, but you're the one who's designating agent for that listing. Your client is your seller at this point, right? So he's your principal at this time. And then the buyer comes along and the buyer starts asking all the questions. And you start giving all the information. You start with some basic information, 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, this much square foot. That's okay. That's fine. You can talk to anybody like this. But if the buyer starts to tell you more things about him, oh, my family is growing and I need this and that, and then he gives you personal information stuff. Now, this is sometimes, even though if you don't tell him to stop and say, hey, you're not my client at this point, please don't tell me this stuff, because whatever the information you tell me now, it's my obligation to take it and pass it on to my client, which is my seller, right? But sometimes, just because you talk too much, the buyer might imply that you're working for him now, right? Because he told you all the things, he implies that you're going to be helping him. So sometimes that relationship happens, or that authority happens by the implied agency. So for the exam, this is not the best thing. In real life, as you see, it's not really a good thing. So don't get into this relationship. I'll give you more details sooner today, right? But just know that this is something happens without you wanting it to happen. It just happened. You just suddenly the buyers are talking too much, or you said too much, right? And you might get into the relationship that way. Okay, so the ratification. Can you highlight this one? Can you highlight RAT, R-A-T, okay? That's the easier one too, because sometimes they'll ask you for spelling for this type of authority, right? So just know that it's R-A-T, because they'll give you ratification, rectification. It's the RAT. Okay, so what is this ratification is? So this is when the agent takes too much of the authority. He does something over and beyond what he's supposed to do, but then the seller, or whatever the client you're working with, he accepts it. He ratifies your actions. So I'll give you an example. Let's say your seller asks you to sell a property. Actually, let me give you a question. Yeah, we have a question here. Question 3. Let's do this one, then we'll come back to the last relationship. Okay, question 3. Alan is Peter's agent with the express authority. So what does that mean? They'll put in terms what they want from each other, okay? To rent the Peter's cottage for summer months. So basically, he has an express authority to rent it. You get the point, right? However, in his capacity as a Peter's agent, Alan accepts an offer to purchase the cottage instead. When Peter discovers the incident, he's so impressed by the price that he calls and tells the purchasers that he adopts Alan's act. And they say, which of the following is a result of this action at law? So basically, my question to you, an agent, he had an express authority to rent. That's all he had. That's the only authority he had. Did he overreach that authority? Did he went over and above what he can do? Yeah, what did he do? He accepted the offer to buy that house, right? So somebody put an offer to buy instead of renting, and he accepts this. Now, we as an agent, do we have that type of authority to accept the offers? Can we make decisions on behalf of our clients? Hopefully he said no. We can, right? We're the matchmakers. We match them up, right? We can advise them what they can do, what they should do, but we can't make decisions on anybody's behalf. So in this case, he definitely took too much of what? The agent took too much of an authority. He took too much on his shoulders. And now, if the seller of this property, right, or the owner of the property, if he did not accept this and says, I don't want to sell it, I'll ask you to rent it. So if the seller said no, what do you think will happen? That means the agent breached the warranty of the authority. Breached the warranty of the authority. He took too much authority on his shoulders and now he's going to be liable for this. Of course, the seller doesn't have to sell it if he doesn't want to. Makes sense? But now the buyer, who do you think he'll come after? He'll come and complain to your boss, right, BCFSA, and then they'll give you a discipline hearing for taking too much authority on your shoulders, right? And the buyer can sue the agent for the breach of the authority, and he's probably going to sue for damages, right? So do you see how many problems you get in? So if you have an express authority to rent, that's all you can do. But in this case, he decides to sell it, right? He made a decision on behalf of the seller. But what did the seller do? He ratified the action. He accepted his agent's action. And he said, yeah, I'm actually happy. I'm happy that you sold it for me, even though I asked you to rent. And if he accepts the agent's action, that means the agent is off the hook. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So the agent says, oh my gosh, thank you. Thanks for accepting this offer, because otherwise I would be screwed, right? The buyer will come after me. But the seller ratified the action. So that means the seller gave him that authority on top of the other authority, right? So he said, no problem, I'll get into this contract. And now the agent is off the hook, and now the seller and the buyer will be in a binding contract now to sell that property and to buy that property, right? So what is ratification? Is when the agent takes too much of the authority, right? He breaches it. And then what has to happen? Your principal, the person you're working for, has to accept that and says, you know what, that's fine. I'm okay with this. So he ratified your action. So story will change, but as long as you know what they refer to, right? Agent takes too much authority, the principal accepts it. That's good now, right? It's nobody coming after the agent in this case. So the seller has ratified his agent's action. Therefore, the purchasers cannot sue Alan for the breach of the warranty of the authority, which makes sense, right? That's true. And then when Peter adopted Alan's act, he created the legal authority by means of the revocation, right? No, it's not about revoke. Right? Nobody changed their mind here. It's about RAT, R-A-T. Okay, so I want to come back. We still have to talk about this agency by estoppel. So again, this is just the authorities. This is kind of a relationship you can get into. So if you're going to date somebody, you expressly state all your terms and conditions, then that's the best type of relationship, because everybody knows what to expect, right? An express relationship. Implied, sometimes you get into the relationship without even knowing that, but apparently you are, right? And then you have ratification when somebody accepts your actions, right? So they ratified it. And then we have the agency by estoppel. Now that is a Latin word, right? And it basically says the principal acts in such way to lead the third party to believe, right, that the agent has the authority to act on behalf of the principal. Okay, so what did I just say? So basically, and this is where they're telling the agent, say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go on vacation. I'll be gone for 6 months. Here's my listing. Sell it. Whatever price you get, I'll be okay with this. So I trust you, and I know that you're going to do a great job. Okay? So basically, when your principal gives you all of the authority to act on his behalf, or the principal is sick and bad right now and says, you know what, I still like you and I still trust you, just do whatever you can, just sell my house. Okay? I give you all the rights. Okay, so that's good. So the agent has way more authority than he thought, but that's a good thing for him because he can actually act on behalf of the seller. Okay, the agent. In real life, good luck with this, you'll never see this stuff. Okay, but let's say the agent has it, and it says when the agent gets that type of authority, he needs to make sure that he communicates that to the third party. So let's say if I'm the agent, you're the seller, you told me, Anna, I'm going to be away for 3-6 months, and I want you to sell the house. I'm giving you the agency by estoppel. So the biggest type of authorities that you can have over the listing. That's it. Sounds good to me. If I'm doing an open house as an agent, okay, on your behalf, and I have all this agency by estoppel relationships where I can act on your behalf, the buyer comes along. And this is where they talk about that third party. So as long as I communicate to the buyer, and as a buyer, I am the agent, but I have an agency by estoppel authority. So I can make decisions on behalf of the seller. If I communicate that to the buyer, then I'm protected. As long as the buyer aware of this, right? Then I can get into the contracts, I can act on behalf of my seller with that buyer. So I can do a lot of things in this. But buyers have to be aware. But if I don't let that buyer know, then he can come after me and he can come after the seller and sue us both, right? So it says the principal acts in such a way to lead the third party to believe, right, that the agent has the authority to act on behalf of the principal. So basically, in this situation, when your principal gives you that authority, you have to let the buyers know. If you want to let them know that yes, you are an agent with that authority, they'll come after you and they will also going to sue the seller. I know I repeat myself, but this is a crucial information. So this is the type of authorities you can get in. So then, when you sign a contract with your client, let's say you want to take the listing, right? You said, sure, let's sell your house, right? You pull out a listing contract. And what do you usually do with that listing contract? All the terms, how long you're going to take the house for, what's the price you're going to sell it for, how much commission you're going to pay me, all of those terms will go in that listing contract itself, right? That's what we usually do. What type of relationship is this? What's that? That will be an express one, right? Express because it's all stated inside the contract. Okay, good. So now, when you get the express contract relationship, you're basically asking for 3 authorities that will be expressed in that contract. So basically, when we get a listing contract, it's all there. It says that the seller have to give us the authorities, right? And those authorities come together as a package. So that means you cannot separate them. The seller cannot say, oh, I'll give you the first authority, but not the other ones. He has to give them all to you. So for the exams, when they're talking about express contract, and if they say, what type of authority do you get with that express contract? In real estate, we get all three as a package, as a combo. It's like you go to sushi place, you can't just get a combo without the miso soup. They always stick it in there, right? So it's kind of like a combo thing that we get when we sign the listing contract. So what are the three combos that we have in here, or the three things in the combo? We have an express authority, which we always said that whatever we put in the listing contract, right, everything has to be expressed, right? How much commission, how long we're going to take it for, how much is the price going to be? So we express all the terms in there. So that's understandable. That's the easy one, right? Then also in that listing contract, we also tell them that they have to give us the implied authority. Now, so what does that imply? That means it's not stated, it's not expressed in there, it's not written down in the contract, but we expect to get those type of authorities on top of the other authorities. Okay? So implied is basically says, look, it's not stated in the contract that I can do open houses, but in order for me to sell the house, I should be doing open houses. So if somebody called me and asked me for the information, even though it's not stated in the contract that I can talk to anybody and advertise your house, but I know that I should be doing those things and give that information to the buyers if they need to, I imply that it's okay for me to do this so I can sell your house. Okay? Bring the buyers to the house to show the house, right? So it's an implied authority that we also get together as a package when we sign that express contract with the clients. Okay? So the showings, negotiations, all the things that comes as a part of the job, right? So it's implied that it's going to be there. So expresses what is the job itself, right? For how long, right? How much commission you're going to pay me? What's the price, right? Implied and the usual and customer authority, this is how you do the job, right? So that's kind of like those implied things on top of things. So the usual, sometimes they call it usual authority, sometimes they'll call it the customary authority, means the exact same thing. That's another authority that we get with the express contract, with express relationship. And what is this? This is kind of a usual thing. So if you say, look, if I'm a real estate agent and if I'm dealing with a seller, it's kind of a usual thing to ask for the keys for the property, isn't it? So it's okay to collect the keys from the seller, usual authority. So it's not going to be expressed in there that I will be collecting keys from you, right? It's not going to be in the contract, but we understand that yes, I will be collecting those keys. If you're working with a buyer and if he removes his subjects and he wants to buy a property, it's usual to ask for that deposit from him, right? And take it to your brokerage. So those kind of things that comes as a part of the job. So that's it. So you just have to know that in real estate, those authority is not separable. They have to give them all three to you. But if it's different type of, let's say if you're going to go buy paintings, then it could be any of those authorities, right? Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by this. Then we have an apparent authority. So this authority only comes with that relationship, okay? That is called the agency by estoppel. Remember that one? The one that they give you all the rights to act on your behalf. I go on vacation for 6 months. Can you take care of my property, right? An agency by estoppel. What do you have to do with that relationship? You have to make sure that the buyers or the third parties, you notify them and tell them, hey, I am the agent though, but yes, you will be dealing with me because the seller is away, but I have the rights to act on behalf of the seller. Okay? So out of all the relationship, the agency by estoppel is the one that creates this apparent authority. In my mind, it sounds like parenting, right? You're like a parent to the listing. You can make decisions of those, on behalf of the listing. That's an apparent authority. It's stronger authority. So I'll say it again. For the express relationship, right? If it's just a regular listing, you're asking for all those three authorities. You have to ask for all three, and they have to give them all to you. But if it's an agency by estoppel relationship where they give you all your rights, then you're going to ask for a different type of authority. You're going to ask for this apparent authority, an apparent. So you can become a parent and you can make decisions on behalf of that kid. Right? That's how I think about it. On the exam, they'll ask you for the specific things. They say, what does it comes from? It results from the operation of the legal doctrine of estoppel. So remember, the estoppel or agency by estoppel creates this apparent authority. So if they give you a question about the apparent, just know what they're looking for. They're looking for that estoppel is the answer. Right? That's what they want. So we talked about this. I give you an example about this again. You have to let the buyers know. So the third party, so if it's not your client, have to consider from the conduct of the principal, which is your client, and the agent, that the agent did in fact possess the authority. As long as he's aware and as long as he knows that you are just an agent who acts on behalf of the seller, then that's okay. You didn't do nothing wrong. But if you act on behalf of the seller, but you don't notify the buyers, which is the third party in this story, then if they find out later that you are just an agent without authority and you didn't tell them about this, they'll come up to you, they'll sue you for damages, for the breach of the warranty of the authority. Okay? Yeah, so that's good. Question 4. Where a principal of an agent has acted in such manner as to lead the third party to believe that he's an agent has authority to perform certain acts on his behalf, and the third party deals with the agent in bona fide belief, and he's bona fide, I believe everything you say, right? That the agent has the authority that he or she represents, the agent is said to have what type of authority. So how would you recognize this? Out of all of the authorities we have an express, we have an implied, right? We have all different ones, but how do you know what they're referring to? When they start talking about the third parties who believes or who deals with the agents and they know that he has the authority, then you're always looking for that apparent authority, right? So somebody acts like a parent now to that listing and they have a lot of extra rights to deal with things, right? That's what happens here. Question 5. So Carol, which is the seller, asked Tim, the agent, to sell her bike and her car, not less So she wants him to sell the car for in excess of $1,700 for the car and not less than $300 for the bike, right? So that's what she asked him to do, and they ask her which of the following is an example of the implied authority. So they want the implied authority here. So look at option number one. So the agent Tim, he sold the car to Mary, which is the buyer, for $1,750. So what was the express authority that he had with the seller between Carol and Tim? They had an express authority, and Carol told him no less than $1,700 for the car and $300 for the car. So he sold it. So when he did what he asked her to do, then that becomes an express authority, right? It's express. He did exactly what she asked him to do. So that's perfect, but that's not what they're looking for because they're looking for the implied authority. Now look at option number two. Before Mary, which is the buyer, was willing to purchase the car, she insists that she test drives the car and he lets her. Now, is that okay? If the buyer calls and says, "Can I come and look at one of your listings?" you would imply that it's okay to show them the property because that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to sell it, right? So he implied that it's okay to test drive the car because, that's the way I can sell that car. So the option number two would be the answer in this case because they're looking for that implied authority, right? So he implied to do something extra to help the sale. So hopefully you got this one, but can you look at option number three and tell me, what do you think option three talks about here? So when the buyer Mary, she was viewing the car, she noticed a small roof rack on top of seller's garage. And she said, can I buy that roof rack? And the agent Tim said, sure, go ahead. I'll charge you $75 for it. What did Tim do? What did he just do? Did he take too much of the authority on his shoulders? Yes, he did, because nobody asked him to sell the roof rack, and he did sell it. Okay, offered to sell. That's the problem. So when somebody takes too much of the authority, then they can come and sue you for that. Somebody will come and sue you for this, right? But in this case, when the seller Carol came back, she told him that she was pleased that he had sold the rack since she had no more use for that, right? So the seller ratified the action. She accepted his action. He took too much of authority. She came back and she accepted it and says, that's fine. I'm okay with this. So that's ratification, right? So if you were looking for the ratification, that would be the answer you're looking for. And option number four, after advertising the bike for sale for $300, and then he sold the bike for $260 because that was the only offer that he received. Now, even though they had an express authority that he should sell it for $300, but sometimes things happen. The seller says, can you sell my house for $1 million? And then you sell it for a bit less. Yeah. As long as she accepts the money, as long as she okay with this, then that's okay, right? Not okay, but not okay. But it's more, there's not much of the authority in here. It still binds in the express authority kind of thing, right? Because he's still there. So anyways, first three options, those ones you definitely have to know. Make sure that you know what's implied and what is ratification for sure. Okay, question 6. Paul grants Luke, his agent, the express authority to list his house, but has not expressly granted the right to show to the potential buyers. If Luke shows the house to the potential buyer, he would likely to act on what type of authority? So it's expressed that he can list the house, but it's not expressed that he can show the property. So if he wants to show the property, what kind of authority he would be using? And implied. Beautiful. Good job. He'll imply it's okay to bring those buyers to the house. Okay, question 7. Which of the following types of authority would not provide an agent with a sufficient authority to create a binding contract between the principal and the third party? So which one is not an authority, basically, right? Which one is not a binding authority that we've never talked about? Hopefully it's option number 3 because there's no such thing as an assumed authority, right? Implied, apparent, express. Those ones we have for sure. Question 8. Lucy asked Ricky to act as her agent at the action of the painting of the famous BC painter. So Lucy is an enthusiastic art collector and tells Ricky that no matter what, she must pick up the owner of the deceased famous apple tree painting. And Ricky is also told that under no circumstances is he to come away from the action without buying the painting for Lucy. So basically she said, you know what, you go get me that painting, do not come back home without that painting, right? So at the action, the deceased BC painter apple tree painting is offered with a second smaller tree painting. So basically he says, true, she told me to buy this apple tree painting, but it comes as a combo with another painting. And she told me I should never come back home without that painting. And what did he do? The two paintings are offered as a package, and accordingly, Ricky, as a successful bidder, purchased both paintings for Lucy. What type of authority did Lucy provide Ricky with in their agency relationship? Okay, definitely she gave him an express relationship, but was that just an express relationship? Is that the only one that she gave him as an authority? Not only, because why? He also implied that it's okay for him to buy the second painting because she told him, don't come back home without my apple tree painting. So he had to buy the second one, right? So for that reason, he had an express authority and also the implied authority that he implied to buy both of them, right? That's where it's coming from. Okay, so now we're going to talk about termination of the authority. So how do you cancel that relationship of yours, right? What if it's not working out? Can you get out of the relationship? We're not in a Muslim country. We have rights. We can change our minds. We can cancel it, right? So yes, we both have equal rights. That's what I want you to understand. So even the agent has the rights to cancel the relationship, walk away and says, you know what, it's not working out for me. So at will, that's the first way to cancel the relationship. Hopefully you get that, right? So at will, that means it's both parties' mutual understanding and they say, look, either party can terminate the relationship at will because the relationship is based on a mutual consent. So both of you agree to get into the relationship and both of you agree to cancel it. So that's the best way to cancel the authority. Revocation, revoke. Remember that? Can you change your mind? Of course you can. You can do it orally. So basically you can call and say, hey, it's not working out. Sorry, done. We're done, right? In writing, or it could be expressed in the contract. So it doesn't matter in which way, but you can always revoke. You have the rights to do so. Could be done by conduct. Now, this is the one that we highlighted for you because we want to make sure that you know what to look for. So basically, the act of the principal that is inconsistent with the communication of the authority. So basically, your principal is the one who hired you, okay? And right now, let's say you took a listing for 6 months and you sold the house within a month. So you are inconsistent with the communication of the authority. So basically, your authority is already finished because you sold the house, even though it's for 6 months that you signed a contract for to sell this house. But if you sold within the months, there's nothing else to sell, right? Your relationship is basically finished, right? So you look for that inconsistency when they're inconsistent with the communication of the authority. So something happened that gets things off, or it could be that principal told you, right, or the act of the principal that is inconsistent. So it could be that you said, look, I'm going to be doing the showings every Saturday, Sundays, right? And I want to make sure that the house is nice and clean, and I want you to be out of the house as a seller from, let's say, 3 to 5, right? On the Saturday you come, and guess what? The house is a mess. The seller did not listen to you. He was inconsistent with the communication of your authority. So he's not taking you as an authority in any way, and he doesn't do what you asked him to do. So with some type of inconsistency, then it could be, or you can terminate the contract. Basically, you can just walk away and say, hey, I told you that I'm going to be doing open houses. The house should have been clean. And it happens constantly, let's say for 2-3 Saturdays in a row. That's inconsistency, right? So think of it as something is not how you expressed it in the first place, right? It's different. So for that reason, you can walk away. Frustration, you know what that is when the house burns before or after you sign the contract? Okay, remember the common mistake, C comes before F, right? So frustration after you sign the contract and something happens before the possession of the property from the buyer, then that's a frustration, right? So you don't have to buy a house. And if you are the agent trying to sell the house, of course, your relationship will be canceled because you have nothing else to sell, right? So you will terminate that relationship. If you sell it, guys, or if you die, or if somebody goes insane, or if somebody goes bankrupt, that also can terminate the relationship. Basically say, hey, no money to sell, or I became a crazy person, right? Or I died. There's not much you can do to me. It's pretty straightforward. But the questions comes up on the exam. Sometimes they are tricky, and I'll show you some of them. Question 9. Which of the following scenarios would result in the termination of the agency relationship? Look at option number 1, an oral revocation of an agency relationship by the principal. So can the principal, your person that you're working for, can they orally revoke and change their mind? Says, I don't want to work with you. Yes, they can. An oral revocation of the agency relationship by the agent. Can the agent revoke and says, you know what, I changed my mind? Yes, he can. Right? The death, insanity, bankruptcy, so it should be all of the above. Right? That's the easy question. Okay, question 10. Which of the following events will terminate the real estate agency relationship? Okay, option 1, action of an agent which exceed the terms of the agent's authority under the listing agreement. Okay, what they're looking for, what will terminate the relationship. So they're looking for those death, insanity, mutual, right? So here it says action of the agent with exceeds of the terms of the agent's authority. So if you take too much of authority and instead of renting, you're selling the house, does it mean that your relationship with the seller will be terminated? No, you're going to get in trouble, right? But it does not terminate a relationship just because you took too much authority on your shoulders, right? And you went beyond what you can do. So not this one, okay? A failure by the agent to present all of the offers to the principal. Now, that's your obligation. You're supposed to, whatever the offers come your way, you're supposed to present them to your seller, right? To the principal you're working for. But if you don't do this, then you're going to get in trouble, but it doesn't cancel your relationship or your contract. An offer by the agent to purchase for herself the principal property. Okay, and the last one, the act of the principal, which is inconsistent with the communication of the authority. You're looking for the keyword of inconsistency. That's one of the things always cancel the relationship. Okay, and just because you want to buy a house doesn't mean that the contract or the relationship will be canceled. Okay, so this is a tricky one because instead of asking you what will terminate, they ask you which one will continue to exist. When is your relationship will continue to exist? So it's opposite from what we're just doing with the other questions. Option A, B, C, D. Because it's A, B, C, D, you're going to use the method of elimination. So Lauren lists the house for sale with Steve, and the house burns down. Okay, with that, the relationship still exists, or is it going to be terminated? You remember when the house burns frustration, then the contract will be terminated. So that's not one of them. So anything with A is out. Okay, 1 is out. Lauren enters into the exclusive listing agreement with his agent, Mark. Lauren then sells the property himself without Mark's assistance. Now, what happens to the relationship here? So he sells it without the real estate agent. Okay, let's skip this one. Lauren enters into the written listing contract for sale of his house with Brad, and Brad dies. Definitely cancels it. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the opposite one. Definitely no B's. So if there's no B's, no A's. Okay, let's look at option D. Lauren tells his agent over the phone that he no longer has the authority to sell his home. Okay, remember how we talked about this stuff? So basically when you revoke and you change your mind, that cancels it. When you sell the property and you have nothing else to sell, even though he sold it without his agent's assistance, but he sold it. Yes, the agents can come and sue him for the commission. Okay, he can do that. But because it's sold, because somebody died and because it's burned, there's no more to deal with. Do you see this? The relationship will be over. And they ask you, when would that exist? In none of the above. So that's why I say sometimes they'll put it for you in a tricky version, just like this one. So the agent's duty to his principal. So now we're going to talk about duties. So the duty from the agent to the principal, from the principal to the agent, right? And then we'll have the agent and the third party. So we have so many types of duties to talk about. But just remember, every time when they talk about the agents and they talk about what is your duty, remember the umbrella, the fiduciary duty, we have to be, should we be loyal? I should ask you. Yes, we should be, right? So the loyalty, confidentiality, so keep all the information, confidential. Don't disclose it. Don't talk about your clients or your family members or your friends. You have to give them a full disclosure. So anything that comes your way, you have to disclose. On exam, they will drill you with that disclosure. They want you to know that you have to disclose everything that comes to you. So for example, let's say if I'm working with a seller and I'm trying to sell the house for the seller, and the buyer comes along and gives me all this random information saying that the property will go up in value next year because there's going to be new development and all that information. What do I do with that information? do I have any obligation to give that to the seller? I have to. I don't know if it's true or not, but anything comes my way, I have to disclose it. Right? So that's kind of what they're referring to. But loyalty, right? Remember that umbrella? That's the one they're looking for. The duty to exercise reasonable care and skill. So basically, you have skills before you sell something. If you don't know how to sell, or if you don't specialize in acreages, then don't put your foot in there. Hire somebody or refer to somebody else or learn it, right? But yeah, so duty to carry out the lawful instruction of the principal. Highlight the keyword lawful. Because if your seller tells you, don't disclose about the leaky roof, or don't talk about broken furnace. You get the point, right? So you said, I'm sorry, but I do have to disclose it because, I have the highest duty to who? As an agent, you have the highest duty to the client or the public? To the public. So you have no rights. If you hear something from the seller and he tells you not to disclose, that's not lawful instruction. That's opposite from lawful, right? Lawful, that means it has to be, it has to be lawful. So if they tell you not to disclose something, or if they tell you don't talk about leaky roof and a broken furnace, you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to walk away. You're supposed to walk away from that seller, right? That's how they want you to know that for the exams. Or you tell the principal, say, hey, I have to disclose that type of information. Otherwise, they'll come after me and they'll sue me. I don't want that, right? The duty of the account for all of the money, which makes sense. So if buyer gives you a deposit, you don't just go on vacation, right? You put it in your brokerage. So on the exam, if they ask you about the agent's duties to the principal, pretty much everything. But what if they ask you this question? What if they ask you, out of all of the duties that you provide to your principal, which one will never die? So for example, let's say you had a client 7 years back. Okay. And now you're sitting with your friends and you talk about something and that client came up in your mind and start talking about that client information, what you bought and blah, 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 all that information about that client. Are you allowed to do things like that? Even though it happened 7 years back? What if it happens 20 years back? You see, the only one duty that survives all of the other duties is the duty of confidentiality. So that means you have to keep your client's information confidential. You're not allowed to talk about your clients even if it happened 7 years back or 20 years back. Your job is keep it always confidential. So if they ask you which one out of all of the duties, which one is one duty that never goes away? And that's the duty of confidentiality. It does not terminate. It never goes away. Good. So now principals' duties to the agents. Now it's opposite. Okay? So as a principals, what type of duties do they have to us? So your client that you're working with, what are they responsible for? My question, do they have to be loyal to you? Do they have to give you a full disclosure? You see, they have no duties to us. The only duties that they have is duty to comply with the agency agreement. So basically, if they sign your agreement with you, whatever expressed in that agreement, then they should abide by that contract, which makes sense. Duty to indemnify. Indemnify is repay the agent, usually for his expenses. So for something in real life, good luck getting money for that because we do spend money on the advertisement and all the other things. But for the exam, just know that they will ask you, do you have a duty? Does the seller have a duty to you? Yes, he does. Duty to indemnify you, to repay you, right? Or duty to pay you the commission. And that's what usually we end up getting, right? It's when you sell the property, that's when they pay you, right? If they don't pay you, quantum merit will apply. So that means as much as you deserve, you can come and sue them for that. But the principal, basically, they're responsible to pay you for your services or to repay you back. It's called indemnify you, right? And of course, they abide or they comply with with the contract that is signed. Okay. What does the commission do? Commission is due when the title has been exchanged for the money. So when the seller on the completion date, seller gets his money and the buyer gets the title. And we get our commission in the pocket. And that's why we're always waiting for those completion dates and see, like, what is the completion date? Because that's where you get the money. So what if the buyer and the seller, they conspire to sell behind your back? So for example, let's say you are the agent and I'm the seller. Okay, and I asked you to sell my property, and you said, sure, no problem. And you said, I'll be doing open houses. Okay, so while you're doing an open house, you meet up with the buyers, and those buyers go through this open house, but never put an offer on the house. And you tried so hard while you had the listing, and then suddenly the listing got expired. And then you heard that within reasonable time, that buyer went through your open houses, made a deal with me, and I sold the property to him. And you said, but wait, that buyer never put an offer when I was doing the open houses. So you know that something went sideways. Right? Maybe I said to the buyers, like, hey, as a seller, I said, come talk to me. Let's wait for that listing to expire so I don't have to pay my agent commission. And then I'll sell you the property, right? Without the agents involved. Now that's conspired sale. On the example, I'll give you stories just like this one. And just you have to know how to act about it. So if you are the agent, how do you feel right now? If I went behind your back as a seller and sold it to that buyer that went through your open houses, of course, you're not going to be happy. And if you have a license, you haven't dropped your license, can you sue me for this? Of course you can. So it's funny how they sell an exam within a reasonable time. So yes, it doesn't tell you how much time has to pass between the sale and between the listing that expired. It doesn't really matter. But as long as you feel that it's been conspired, then you can comply to your boss, right, BCFSA, and then you can basically sue the seller for your commission, and you will probably win. Right? So if you can prove that it's been conspired. So, but what if your license lapsed? You forget to renew it. Can you still ask to come after your commission if you have no license? Of course not. So when you do your quizzes, just watch for the questions and see how they phrase them for you, right? Or on the exam. Okay, so conspired. So the last relationship is the agent relationships with the third party. No, so again, what is the third party? So if I'm working for the seller and I'm trying to sell his property, the seller becomes my client, so he's the principal, and the third party would be the buyers in this case. So they would come over to see the property, and I would give them some basic information about the property, right? But they're not my client, so they are the third party to the transaction. So can those buyers come after that agent? Can they come after the listing agent and sue him for things? They might. In those three cases, right? So maybe personally liable to the third party if no disclosure of the agency was made to the third party. So basically the injured party, so that means the buyer in this case, right, the third party, if he got hurt somehow by this contract, he lost money, somehow he may choose to sue either the principal or the agent. So if anything happens, right, and the third party feels like, oh, I lost money here or there, he can come after both of you guys, after the principal and after the agent. Think of it as we're working as a team, right? So if anybody's not happy with our team, then they can come and sue the whole team. No authority or insufficient authority. So you remember what I told you? If you're a seller that you're working for, your principal tells you to rent the property and then you decided to sell it, then you took too much of the authority on your shoulders. And if the seller does not accept it, right? So without having the authority to do so, the agent may be liable to the third party for damages for the breach of the warranty of the authority. So basically, if the seller says, no, I'm not selling, I asked you to rent it, then the third party would be not happy, the buyer would not be happy, and he'll come after the agent, and he can sue that agent for the damages, right, for the money, and for the breach of the warranty of the authority. You breached the warranty of the authority. You took too much of authority on your shoulders. So the buyers know that, and they'll come and sue the agents for money. Torts committed by the agent. So now that's something the agent does, right? Well, let's say if I'm taking the listing, right? It's the seller's listing, and I'm the agent in this case. And if I say something negligently or fraudulently, right? Or it has 2,000 square feet without checking, right? It has a brand new roof and I haven't checked the information. I said things sometimes without thinking, maybe I wanted to hurt somebody, but that's the tort committed by the agent, right? Trespass, if I walk through somebody else's property, right? Misrepresentation in some way or the other. So all the things that could be done by the agent, right? I cannot just say, but my seller, my principal authorized me to do so. You know, that's not a defense for the agent, right? There's no such a thing, but my seller told me to say that, or my seller told me to do this. You don't get protected by your seller, right? So for that reason, the principals are responsible for the action of their agents, and therefore principals may also be liable. So that means you're working as a team, and even if the agent is the one who negligently represented the property, or he walked through somebody else's land or did something, then both of them might be responsible at the end to the third parties, right? So just know that you're working as a team. Okay, so this is interesting. So even though when it comes to disclosure, right? So even if you've done all your job right based on the RESA, Real Estate Service Act, under the common law, they may still require further disclosure. So just know, put on the exam, if they ask you, it's enough disclosure, or you satisfied Real Estate Service Act, whatever the legislation that they put in there in place. It's never enough. You're always looking for the option when they talk about the disclosure that you always have to disclose more and more and more, right? So there's never enough, right? So may still require the full further disclosure. Question 12. We often talked about the duties of the agent to the principal. However, the common law, what is the duty owned by the principal to his or her agent? Okay. So what are they asking for? The duty owned by the principal to his agent. Okay, what do we have in here? Duty to act solely for the agent's behalf. Do they have a duty to act solely on our behalf? They have no duty of fiduciary duty to us, right? No. Duty to indemnify the agent for any expenses which the agent may have incurred during the transaction. Okay, they're supposed to pay us something. Okay, duty to full disclosures. Just remember the sellers have no duties to disclose anything to us. They don't have to, right? And all of the above. So hopefully you choose option number 2, right? So they have to pay us one way or the other. Usually they pay us commission, right? Or they're supposed to indemnify you for your expenses. Okay, question 13. Which of the following is not a fiduciary duty that is an agent owes to his principal? So they ask you which one is not a fiduciary duty from the agent to the principal. Okay, duty of loyalty. Should we be loyal? Yes. Duty of the exercise reasonable care and skill. Yeah, you should have some skills. The duty to carry out the lawful instructions. Lawful, that's okay. I can do that. And the duty to indemnify the principal. Do we pay our principals? We don't do that. They're supposed to pay us for our expenses. Okay, question 14. Where an agent with the authority enters into the contract with a third party does not disclose that he or she acting as an agent. Now that's a problem, right? Because you're supposed to disclose to the third party that you are an agent. Then what would happen? The third party may sue, the principal may sue, only the agent may sue. If you just look at the answers here, who will sue who? If you don't disclose the information to the third party, right? So if you don't tell the buyer that I am the agent working on behalf of the seller, right? Then who will sue who? It's definitely not the principal of the agent. It's going to be the third party that's suing. And who would they sue? They can come either after the agent or the principal, right? We're working as a team, so that means they basically can sue both of us. Okay. Question 15. When a listing contract has expired, okay, and the listed property is later sold to a purchaser who was first introduced to the property by the listing brokerage during the listing period, the brokerage will do what? So that's when they conspire the sale, right? This is when they wait out for the listing to get expired and then they put an offer, right? the brokerage will always be entitled for the commission. Always is a bit too strong, unless all options have that, right? In this case, is a bit too much, okay? Never be entitled for the commission. That's also very strong two words. So never and always, please watch for this. It's kind of like too much of the information, right? Be entitled for the commission where the vendor and the purchaser have conspired, and that's the keyword that you're looking for, because that's where we can ask for that commission, right? And be entitled to the commission if she can prove the purchaser inspected the house. It's not about the inspection, it's about the conspire, right? Even if it says entitled, even though we're not entitled in real life or anything, on the exam, it's a very strong word, but in this case, they all have entitlement in every single option, so you have to choose which one is the better one, okay? Definitely when somebody conspires the sale. Okay, so mortgage strata people, right? Property management people, you guys are done. This is all you have to know about the agency. Now, for my real estate people, this is where we're gonna get more into details right now. Now we're finally going to be talking about the forms. Now this is very useful, right? This is something that you're going to be using in real life. So definitely listen to this. We will be attaching the forms for you in this chapter so you can look over them. You don't have to print them, but it would be nice for you just to see them because that is the forms you're going to be using in real life. And it's so important for you to know them. And I think I'm going to explain to you them better than your post-licensing course that you're going to go after you pass the exam. I'm telling you, right? So I'll try to make it as simple as possible. And I'll show you all of the forms that you will be working with. It's going to be such a good like an hour of our class right now. So before we get to the forms, I just want to talk briefly about the relationships, just to make sure that we are on the same page, make sure that you understand who does what and who is the listing agent, who is the selling agent, right? Let's help me out here. So you're helping somebody to list a house. So when you list in the house, okay, who are the parties to the listing contract? We are, as an agent, who are we? We are the matchmakers. We match them up. Are we part of the contract? We never part of the contract, right? So and that's a good thing because they don't basically sue you, they're suing your brokerage. So just keep that in mind that we're not part of any contracts. So parties to the listing contract will be your seller and that will be your listing brokerage, which makes sense, right? And then you will be a designated agent. So that means you will be designated to work with that seller and to sell the house and you're gonna get commission when it's sold. That commission will be given to you by your brokerage, right? So that's how it works. Good job, okay? Selling the brokerage, that relationship. So just you become a listing agent, right? Make sure that you understand how they call you. So if you list in the house, you are the listing agent, right? Selling is your principal because that's your client that you're working for, right? You become a designated agent. So if anything happens to you, if you die, that listing does not go back to your family, right? Or your wife, if she's in the same office, it will go back to your brokerage, right? And in this case, buyer will be a third party to the transaction because he's not your client, okay? Now, what if you're helping somebody to buy a home? Right? If you're helping them to buy something, then you're the contract of purchase and sale. That's the contract you're going to get into. So who are the parties to that contract? Right? That will be between the buyers and the sellers. So now this is where you're going to, if you're working with a buyer, you become a selling agent. Right? It's a funny word, but you are the selling agent, not the listing agent. Right? And the contract that you're going to write them, contract of purchase and sale, will have the buyer's information and the seller's information because it's the buyer's offer to the seller. Right? Pretty simple. So you are the selling agent. So now the buyer is your principal. That's your client that you're working for. You're the selling agent. Right? You designated to work with that buyer. And at this point, sellers will be your third party. Right? So I just want to go through all the terms. Good job. I think we talked about it so many times, but I'll say it again. Can you buy or can you help to sell anybody's house, right, without the informed consent? No. So first thing, so if they ask you before you assist anyone, before you do any transaction with the clients, right, you have to make sure that you must disclose about the type of the representation relationship. We'll talk about this. And consumer must be fully informed to give their informed consent. So without the informed consent, without their agreement, you're not allowed to get into the transactions with them, right? Or even talk to them. So this is how you, basically, this is how we start, right? So every time somebody gives you more information about themselves, right? Let's say you're doing an open house, it's not in your listing, right? You're trying to get some clients in here. If you give them just a random information about this open house, you know, it has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, that much square foot, that's okay. You don't need to collect any of this information. You don't have to tell them what type of relationship you're going to be, how you're going to represent those people, basically, right? But the relationship that we can have them as clients if they decide to work with you, or if they decide to work with you, they can also become unrepresented parties, right? Not a client relationship, right? So it's basically a client or not a client. And we can represent both of them. We still can do this, but then we have to show them the benefits, right? So basically, if somebody comes to the open house and they start sharing more information with you, you know, our family's growing and we do need to buy a bigger house and we have to move from this area and we want to move here, this is where you have to stop them. And if you're just doing an open house, say, hey, you can't give me all that information, right? Because otherwise we can get into this implied relationship without me even knowing, because sometimes too much information puts me in a position that I'm supposed to represent you, right? So please don't say anything to me at this point. Let's meet up, let's just sit down and let's talk about if you want me to represent you, if you want me to give you more information about this house or anything like this or this area, then we can talk about the relationships, okay? So we have this form that I'll show you in a minute, right? But at this point, you have to know what is a sole agency, right? Or no agency relationship. A sole agency, what does sole stands for? Sole, one, right? So that is a client relationship. And that's something we want our people to understand, that if it's a buyer who is unrepresented, right? No agency, he's unrepresented by anyone. So nobody's protecting him. Nobody's helping him. And nobody's on his side at this point, right? But when you say to him, it says, look, if you want to share all that information with me, and if you want me to help you, right, and if you want me to give you a full disclosure about things and do research on your behalf and protect you on everything, then we should get into the client relationships, because that's where you're going to get my loyalty. That's where we're going to avoid the conflicts of interest. So that means if you say something to me, I can't take that information and pass it on to the other client. Right? You will be protected, basically, right? Right? Fully disclosure, relevant information, right? Disclosure, full disclosure, and protect your confidentiality, right? So, but the conflict of interest is what they're looking for. They say, look, let's say if I'm doing an open house for my seller and I am the listing agent, and if the buyer comes along and he wants me to work with him so he can buy this house that I'm trying to sell, then I cannot take him as a client. Why? Because I already have my seller as a client. But I can help him as unrepresented party, basically no agency relationship. Say, I can fill out the contract for you, but I can't really help you with anything. I can give you advice. I can't tell you what price. Don't tell me your motivation. Don't tell me anything about you, because I can just help you to fill out the contract, right? But I'm not providing you loyalty, no duty of avoiding the conflicts, right? No full disclosure, no confidentiality. So basically, if you say anything to me, I have to take that information and pass it on to my client, which is a seller at this point, right? So that's kind of what they're trying to stop. They're trying to stop that dual agency that we have for years. And in all the other provinces, they still have dual agency. They have no issues with them. But British Columbia is special. Okay, so relationship, sole agency, that's a client relationship, right? That's where you provide them all the services. That's when you care for them, and it's sole, right? So that means you work with many clients, right? It's not a problem, but as long as there's no conflict of interest, which we'll talk about. No agency, that's when you tell them, hey, if you don't want me to work with you as a client, I can work with you as unrepresented party. So that means I can just sign the contract on your behalf, but I cannot advise you on anything, right? Licensee owes no fiduciary duty, limited services only, right? So that's where it gets limited to things what you can do for that unrepresented client, not client party. Provide general market information, just a general thing, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, right? Help fill out, complete the contract without providing the advice, right? I can help you to fill out the contract, presenting the offers to from the unrepresented party. And I can present that offer to my seller, but I can't advise you on anything, right? That's basically what you can do as no agency relationship. Dual agency, as I just mentioned, in British Columbia, they don't want it. Even though in some small, like a narrow exception, we still have it, that you're still allowed to do that, right? But it says it is essentially banned. It is essentially prohibited in BC. So they're trying to discourage all of the agents to have a dual relationship. Now, what is this dual agency relationship? So if I am a listing agent and the seller is my client and I'm trying to sell his house, and now the buyer comes and says, look, I also want to be your client. Can you represent me? And I'll buy this house that you're selling. I say, no, I'm sorry, I already have one client in this relationship. I can take you and show you the other houses, and you can become my client, and I'll help you with all the other properties. But for this specific transaction, I cannot keep you as my client, because seller is my client. So they don't want the 2 clients for the same transaction. You get the point, right? Or if 2 of your clients, 2 of your buyers want to buy the same property. Now that's also a conflict of interest in here. You see the problem is? So that's kind of a dual agency. They don't want one agent to close the deal from 2 sides. So that's why it says banned or prohibited, but we do have an exception, which I'll explain to you. Okay, so question 16. Unrepresented party is not a client of any license, not a client to any licensee in a particular real estate transaction, okay? Unrepresented party. A client of a brokerage at large without a designated agent representing him. An individual in an agency relationship with the licensee. An individual with a dual agency relationship with the licensee. So which one is definitely? It's definitely the one that's not a client, right? So that's unrepresented party. So that's good. Okay, so we're finally going to be talking about different forms. Honestly, I think I'm going to give you a way better explanation about the forms than your applied course might try to teach you them. So this is really good stuff. And we will be attaching all of the forms for you in this chapter, just so you can see them. You don't have to go over them. You don't have to print them. But it's nice for you to see them and read them if you have to, so kind of understand what we're going to be dealing with in your new profession, right? So you'll be using all of those forms for sure. So these 7 forms that you see in front of you right now, this is the forms that are prescribed by your boss. Now, who's your boss? That is BCFSA, right? British Columbia Financial Service Authority. So we used to have an old boss, which we call council. He's gone, right? He's retired. Now we have BCFSA. And they said that this is the forms that are prescribed. They are mandatory. They're not changeable. So you going to be using this form as they come. As what you see in them, you cannot alter them. You use them as they come, exactly how they are, right? So all those forms, if I ask you, are they prescribed? Are they mandatory? Please say yes, right? We don't change them. Every single brokerage will be using the same forms. Now, every time you're going to be working with your clients and whatever the forms you're going to be providing to your clients, those forms have to be all submitted at the end of the day to your brokerage. I don't know if you guys know that, but every single form that you're going to be working with your clients have to be in the records, right? The brokerage has to keep those forms for 7 years, and you personally have to keep all that information also for 7 years. We'll talk about more of the 7 years in your technology chapter, right? The last chapter you're going to study. But let's talk about them one at a time. So these forms, the first one is called Disclosure of the Interest in Trade Form, 5.9. So this is the form, it says disclose if you have any interest in this sale, right? In this trade. So when do we use this form, right? When do we use this form? We use this form is when you personally want to buy or sell something, right? You have an interest in this trade and you have to tell them that I am the agent I am the agent, and I'm going to be selling, or I'm going to be buying the real estate from here. Right? It also applies to your associate. Right? So anybody that you're working with, you have to let them know that we're working together, and I'm buying or selling for them. Or if it's your mother, or if your relatives, or if there's any connections, you just have to disclose and say there's some type of relationship going on here, and I just have to disclose to you and tell you that I am part of the sale in some way. Right? When should you give that form? Or when should you represent that form? It always has to happen before the agreement is entered into. Always has to happen before. So they have to be aware that, yes, there's going to be a real estate agent involved in here, somebody who's buying for himself. And what does he want to buy this property for? So this is what this form is about, okay? It says, I am acquiring or disposing of real estate, right? So you have to check it. It's okay, if I'm buying for myself, if I'm selling it for myself, then I'll show the people that this is it, right? And you have to do this disclosure to all the other parties of the transaction, buyers, sellers, renters, landlords, right? Before the agreement is entered into, right? It's a crucial thing, right? Or if I'm providing the trading services to an associate of mine who is acquiring or disposing the real estate. Associate could be anybody, right? It could be a relative, it could be a friend, but you have to let them know, right? It could be anybody from your work, right? And then they want you to know about what are you going to use this property for, right? So if it's for the personal use, that's okay. You'll check it up here. For the rental, or if you're planning to sell it, the real estate to be resold. So they want you to disclose all that information if you're buying it for yourself, right? That is a prescribed form. That form, at the end of the day, has to be submitted to your brokerage, right? So you have to take all those forms and give it with every transaction to your brokerage, right? So that's a must for you to do. So licensee or the associate of the licensee is directly or indirectly acquiring the real estate. So if you buy in, basically, or the licensee or the associate of the licensee is disposing the real estate. If you sell it, buy or to sell it, okay? When is the exception? When you don't have to provide this form to the clients is when you're planning to rent it for your personal use. So if you say, look, I have a real estate license, but I need to rent the house for my family, that's okay. You don't have to disclose them that you have a real estate license. It's okay. You're allowed to rent a property for your family, right? So that's an exception when you don't have to provide this form, okay? So what happens when you do not disclose that you are the real estate agent and you do have an interest and you're planning to buy for yourself, right, or for your associate? Then what do, right? The contract could be void, or the discipline will come up from the BCFSA, from your boss, right? So that's what they usually do. Okay, question 17. While browsing the multiple listing services one day, Audrey licensee discovers an attractively priced apartment unit with a great view of the ocean. Audrey makes an appointment to see the apartment, and the view is even better in person. Audrey submits an offer on her own behalf, so she's buying it for herself to the seller that afternoon. So as a licensee, which of the following details is not required in a disclosure form to be given to the sellers of the apartment? So basically they say, look, you're going to disclose a lot of things. You're going to disclose your purpose of the property. You're going to put your name in the property, right? And they say which detail is not required to be on that form, okay? Option 1, it says legal description and street address of the apartment. And that should be on the form, right? Somewhere down there, right? Because you have to show them what is this disclosure for which property is it for, right? So of course you have to put that in there, okay? So not this one, because that's true. Right? They say which one is not required. Option 2, Audrey's best estimate of the true value of the property at the proposed completion date. True value, her true value. Does it matter what her true value is, what she thinks the property is worth? Okay, what if they say how many other properties she considers, right, instead of this one? Her personal opinions or her personal search is definitely not something that she needs to disclose in there. But if they ask how much, if she's planning to rent that property later, if she's trying to resell that property, that's the information she needs to disclose. So definitely not this one. That should be the answer. The amount of the remuneration that Audrey anticipates to receive. So should you tell them how much commission you're going to pocket at the end of the transaction? Remember, disclose. Yeah, of course you do. That indication that Audrey is licensed. So you do have to let them know that you are licensed, right? But the only one that in this case you don't have to disclose is what's your personal valuation of the property, or what other properties you might consider. None of their business, right? But everything else is. Okay, question 18. With regard to licensee purchasing property for themselves, which of the following statement is false? Now, do you see what I mean? Like, there's going to be a lot of questions. They will be testing you on your knowledge. What happens if you want to buy it for yourself? And hopefully, that's one of the reasons that you get in the license, so you can start doing investments, right? So you can start buying properties, flipping properties, making, like rental properties. Because at the end of the day, you want to create the passive income for your family, right? So that should be your aim, right? Okay, so they ask you which one is a false statement when it comes to purchasing property for themselves, okay? The Realty Code and the Real Estate Service Act require a member licensee to provide a written notice to the seller when personally buying and selling the property. Yes, of course, it has to be in writing because we have a prescribed form, right? It's the Form 59, Disclosure of Interest in Trade. Okay, that's definitely true. The last came for the false. Key principle behind the imposition of disclosure requirements in relation to the licensee acquiring the real estate for themselves is to ensure that the licensee does not take advantage of the sellers. And that is the key principle, I guess, behind this form. So nobody takes advantage of the sellers. If you're planning to flip that property and buy it, then you have to let them know. One of the check marks, oh, I'm planning to resell it, right? They want to make sure that nobody takes advantage of the seller. That's definitely true. If a licensee does not comply with the disclosure requirements in relation to his or her acquisition of property, the seller can choose to not complete the sale. Yeah, that's an option, right? Because that's the idea, to show them, and if they don't like what they see, they can walk away and say, hey, I don't want to sell it to you, right? So that's definitely true. But what's the problem with option number 4? Disclosure can be made within the service agreement or any other agreement that gives effect to the trade in real estate. What is the problem with option number 4? What do we say about those forms? They are mandatory. Those forms are prescribed. So that means you cannot use any other forms. There's nothing you can use other than specific 5-9 form, right? So it has to be that form. So hopefully you caught on that one. Good. Okay, so all of the forms are prescribed. All of them have to be submitted to your brokerage, right? So now we're going to talk about second, third, and the fourth form, right? Disclosure forms, right? Look at this. Disclosure of representation in trading services form, which is a 510, right? Disclosure of representation in trading services form. That's the form that you're going to be using the most. We call it the DORT, D-O-R-T, DORT. In real life, you'll hear that as DORT form, DORT, okay? Or 510. Some people use 510. Okay, we'll talk about this one first, and then we'll go to the other two disclosures. Okay, so disclosure of representation. You remember what I told you? If you're in an open house, the client walks and he starts asking you questions. Can you give that client basic information? The house has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, that much square foot. Yeah, we're allowed to say that. But if they start asking you more questions, or if the clients start telling you more information about themselves, this is when we have to put the stop to this, right? Because why? Because you need to have this form. You have to explain them the DORT, right? Relationship. What kind of relationship can they have with us before they disclose more information to us, or before we tell them more information, right? So before providing any services, everything has to happen before, right? So if that client at the open house starts telling you more things, you have to stop him and says, you know what, let's meet up after the open listing, or after my open house, we'll meet up for 5-10 minutes, and then I can listen to you, and then I'll, I'll give you the options, right? I'll give you different relationship options you can have, right? You must disclose to the party whether or not you will be representing the party as a client, or you're going to be working with them as a non-client, right? Unrepresented party. So the key purpose of this form, of this DORT form, right, is explain the difference between what would happen if I represent you as a client, or what would happen if you're going to be unrepresented, right? So sole relationship or no relationship, basically, right? What do you want? And only then that we can talk, because I have to explain you about the loyalty. I have to explain you about confidentiality. I have to explain you about conflict of interest. And I need to know where you're standing, okay? Do you want me just to fill out the contract for you as unrepresented party without any feedback or help? Or do you want me to give you all my expertise and help you out as much as I can, right? So that's what this form is about. Why is it not required when you do the open house? Why not? Because you're just giving people general information. If they start talking to you more or asking for more information, that's when you stop them, right? Because you need to make sure that you take them through more details. But when you're just doing general information open house, then of course you don't have to ask every single person who walks through the open house to sign a form or just listen to you about that form, right? Providing factual responses to the general question, 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, that much square foot, that's factual, right? That's something I can explain. That's not a problem. Do not receive any personal information. Remember how I said you have to stop them? Because if they start talking and telling you about their personal reasons, I'm like, stop. My seller is my client right now, okay? Whatever the information you tell me, I'll have to give that, or I have to disclose it to the seller. So it's not good for you to tell me more things at this point. No. I do not receive any personal information from the consumer. Motivation, financial needs, anything, don't tell me more, right? That's where you have to stop them, okay? So use when you're going to be providing some type of services to the client. So if they want to deal with you, if they want you to help them, then that's when you meet up after the open house and you say, okay, let's sit down for a few minutes, I'll buy you coffee, and then you show them that form, right? So the form is pretty straightforward. So the next form that we're going to be dealing with is the disclosure of risk of unrepresented parties. So let's say you put them through the door, okay? You show them as a client, loyalty, full disclosure, blah, 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 right? As a non-client, no loyalty, no duties. So you show them the form. And let's say they decided to go towards non-client, says, you know what? Don't need your help. I'm really good at what I do. I buy all the time. I invest. I just want you to write a contract for me and that's it. And I'll tell you my price and I'll tell you my terms, what to put in there, my subjects. I'm good, okay? So then you'll have to pull up this form. I don't know if you guys notice about the numbers. You see how this one is, like the other one is 5-10, okay? That's DORT. That is an old form. Our government came up with more forms. So this is what the BCFSA added extra things, and now we have 5-10.1, because this is the form you have to provide an extra form if you're not client, but the party that you're meeting at the coffee shop, he wants you to have them as a non-client, right? Unrepresented. So you have to fill out show them another form and says, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? Because this is more risk that comes with this. And if they say sure, no problem, but that's where you have to show that form to them, right? To advise the risk involved in being an unrepresented party. So you basically have to tell them about all of those risks again, why you should not be unrepresented. Use when providing trading services to unrepresented parties and a client in the same transaction. So if it's my seller here, okay, he is my client and I'm trying to sell his house, and this buyer comes along and he said, I just want to put an offer and I don't want anybody else to represent me, okay? Just help me to fill out the contract. Okay, so I said, no problem. Okay, I'll pull up this form and I'll put it in his face and says, you just have to make sure that you understand that it's better for you to have a client relationship. Maybe I can, give you some real estate agent names who can help you out to write the contract on your behalf. And if he says, no, I don't want it to, then you're supposed to help give him this form, right? So disclosure of risk of unrepresented parties. So you have to tell them what all the risks, right? If it's not a client, know your risks, right? Be cautious. That's what they want you to know. Okay, so the key purpose to explain the difference between being a client, right, which is the same thing, and being an unrepresented party. So this is where you show them. They cannot give you, as an agent, advice or appropriate price. We cannot give you advice about any terms and conditions to include in the contract, okay? We cannot negotiate on your behalf. We cannot share any of their clients' confidential information. So I cannot tell you why the seller is selling the house. I cannot tell you anything, basically, right? I can just fill out their things, right? I cannot tell you what's their minimum maximum price. I cannot tell you why they're selling, right? But what I can do, I can share the general information, show the property, provide the factual information, right? Provide you with the standard real estate forms and contracts, and I can help you to fill out those contracts. That's basically what this is all about, okay? So the last one, when it comes to disclosure, right? Disclosure of risk associated with a dual agency. Now, this is where we have to talk about those things, right? What happens if both of your buyers, both clients, right? You present both of them, but they both decided to put an offer on the same property. And you're like, oh my gosh, both of my clients want to put an offer on the same property. What do I do? Or it is your listing, you're working with a seller who's your client, but it's also your buyer as a client that wants to put an offer on the same property that you listed. And you're like, oh, what do I do now? Right? So if both of your clients wants to do something in the same transaction, what do you do then? Right? And this is what this form is about. Okay. So gives the information about the concept of dual agency. So basically it explains to your client what is a dual agency. A managing broker must sign the form and must be provided to BCFSA. So if I take you back here, and if I show you all of those mandatory forms, do you see something that comes with this form? This is the only form that you have to submit, not just to your brokerage, but you also have to submit all the way to your boss, to your BCFSA boss, right? So that's the one who gives you license, somebody who takes your license away from you, gives you that slap on the face, right? This is the only form that they care about. Everything else I don't want to see. Everything else just goes to your office, okay? But when it comes to dual agency, this is the only form that has to be provided to your boss, BCFSA, okay? So I'm going to come back and do everything else, but just know that this is the one. Okay, because they really, really don't like it and they don't want people to do it. That's why. Okay, so must be provided to BCFSA. Has to be. Okay. Okay, so let's see what it says in this form. The real estate professional is required to give you this consumer information before providing services to you as a dual agent. So let's choose a story. So let's say it is my listing, seller is my client, and now one of my buyers decided to put an offer on my listing. So both of my clients wants to be in the same transaction. Okay, so you are receiving this form because the real estate professional representing you also represents another party in the same transaction. So you represent both clients in the same transaction. This is known as a dual agency. Okay, so that's what they want you to know in here. And it says, because of the dual agency presents significant risk to the consumers, it's not permitted in BC except in certain circumstances, right? So this is where it is that exception comes up in here, right? It says dual agency if your property you wish to buy or sell or rent or lease in a remote location that is underserved by the real estate profession. So this is the only exception that they give for the dual agency. Say, look, you live in the area where there's no other agents. There's one agent works in the whole area, and that's all you got. This is where the dual agency is acceptable because they know that you can't pass your client to anybody else because nobody else can help you. Right? So that's why I mean like that minimum exception that we have in here. So question 19. With respect to section 510 of the rules and requirements to make a disclosure of a representation of trading services. So that's your DORT form where you show to you help the client to choose if you want to be your client or if you want to be unrepresented, right? The rules state that a licensee is exempt from making this disclosure if the licensee does not solicit or receive information from the consumer about their motivation, financial qualification, or needs in respect to real estate. And, okay, so basically they ask you when you don't have to show that form, when you don't have to give that DORT to your client, okay? Licensee is the only hosting an open house. Okay, the licensee is offering trading services in the context of the commercial real estate transaction. The licensee is only dealing with the unrepresented party, and the licensee will make the same disclosure in the contract of purchase and sale. Okay, they asking you when you don't have to give that DORT. Okay, so 510, you in real life you'll deal with every single client you deal with, and the only time you don't have to give it to them is when you do an open house because you just giving them the general information, right? And that's why it's like as long as they don't give you all those motivations and all the other things, you don't want to hear them at that stage. This is the first stage. That's where you start with, is with this DORT form. And from there you go and figure out, okay, I'll take you as a client or we'll deal with you as unrepresented. Question 20. Which of the following is not one of the three key purposes of the section 510-1, disclosure of risk to unrepresented parties form? So they tell you we have key purposes, and which one is not one of those key purposes? Why do we show that form to those unrepresented parties? What are we trying to warn them with those forms? And they ask you which one is not one of those reasons. So option 1 is to advise the unrepresented party of the risk involved in dealing with the real estate licensee who's representing a client in the trade of the real estate. And that's kind of a point of this form saying, look, if I already have a client in this transaction and you want to be unrepresented, just know that it's not going to be for your benefit because I have a fiduciary duty to my client. I have to be loyal. I have to give him full disclosure. So you are going to take some risk in here, right? Because I cannot tell you anything. I cannot do anything. I can just fill out the form for you. So that's definitely one of the key purposes. And they ask you which one is not one of them about this form. Number 2 says to inform the client that the licensee is also providing trading services to an unrepresented party. Is this form to tell this party that I also represent somebody else who's unrepresented? No, definitely not the point of this one. So that's why it's not one of those purposes of this form. And I don't have to tell him that I have somebody else who's unrepresented also. Okay. Number 3, to advise the unrepresented party of the limited trading services that I can provide him with. And that's the point. I'm limited to what I can do for you. I cannot advise you on price. I cannot advise you on subjects. I cannot do nothing for you. I can just basically, whatever you tell me, I'll just fill it up and that's it. and serve that form to my other client. To ensure the unrepresented party to seek independent representation in respect to the trade and real estate. So that's why they're always trying to encourage you to send those unrepresented parties and tell them, just go find an agent, or I can give you some names who can help you to represent you. Right? That's what they want to hear from you. So we talked about the disclosure of the interest in trade form. What do we use this? This is when you personally want to buy something for yourself or your associate, right? And you have some interest and you have to disclose to them what you're going to buy this property for. Disclosure of representation in trading services. That's the most commonly used form for every single client or non-client you're going to be working with, just to show them the type of relationships. In real life, we call it DORT, D-O-R-T. Or the Form 510. We only use this disclosure of unrepresented parties where you already have a client in one transaction and that unrepresented party wants to be unrepresented and he wants you just to fill up the contract for you and you have to warn them what will happen. Disclosure of dual agency, that's the only form that you have to submit it to your boss, which is BCFSA, and of course all of the forms have to be submitted to your brokerage. So next one, the conflict of interest when acting in for multiple clients, right? So again, they don't want that conflict of interest. They want you to tell those clients, say, hey, I'm already working with my seller and you cannot put an offer on my seller's property because both of you guys are my clients, right? Conflict of interest form 518. So this form you're going to be using when you have a conflict between two of your clients, right? So let's say if it's two of your buyers suddenly decided to put an offer on the same property and he says, oh my gosh, both of them are my clients and both want the same house. Conflict of interest. Or if it's your listing and you're a buyer, another client of yours want to put an offer on your listing, that is a conflict of interest, right? So this is where you have to show them that form and say, look, this is what will happen when there's a conflict of interest between the clients. So this is their examples. It says one client wishes to make an offer on another client's property. Two or more clients are interested in making an offer on the same property. Okay, one client wishes to rent another client's property. So even if it's a rental stuff, right, you have to let them know. So what do? This is where they will test you because they want you to know, what do you do? Do you say, oh, that's okay, it's fine, I know both of you, I'm not going to disclose both of your interests? Is that what you're supposed to say? Okay, they want you to release one of them. That's what they want. They say, we don't like conflict of interest, we don't like dual agency stuff, so guess what? In British Columbia, you have to let go one of your clients. Right? Release both of the clients would be even better. How about that? So basically they say if you're going to release one client, the released client, right, while continuing to represent the other client, continuing client, using the agreement regarding the conflict of interest between clients. So basically, if you decided to release one of your clients and says, you know what, I'm sorry, but I'm already selling this property and I cannot sell it to you, so why don't I refer you to the other agent? If one of those two clients don't sign this paper, this agreement, right, then you have to let them both go. If one does not put signature on it, one does not agree to be released, then you have to let them go both. And that's where they will ask you those questions. Right? So you have to stop acting for both clients and refer each of your clients to another real estate professional who will present your interest at the transaction. Ask both clients to sign this form. Okay? Under the terms of the agreements, the real estate professional will stop acting for one client, the released one, and continue to represent the remaining client. If one does not sign, you must walk away from both. So basically, that's the shoes that put you in now and says, look, or you walk away from both, or you ask them to sign this form. And if one doesn't sign, then you still have to walk away from both. But if they both sign, then you can release one. And then you still can have one left for yourself. Crazy, right? Okay, so duty to avoid the conflict of interest. So must avoid conflict of interest. If conflict exists, right, if you find that there's some type of conflict of interest, full disclosure to your clients and obtain the consent, the permission of principal to continue acting. Okay, so remember that everything has to be disclosed. Conflict representing the current clients. Buyer clients interested in the seller's client's property. Two buyers clients are interested in the same. So we just talked about all those examples, right? Or even if it's a former client of yours that you sold a house like 2-3 years ago, and now he walks to one of the open houses and now he wants to put an offer on this property. But he's still your client because remember the only duty that survives is the duty of what? Confidentiality. So you still know his personal information. So for that reason, you cannot help him. It's crazy, right? Even if it's your client from past, but you say, look, this is my new client, my seller right now, and I cannot help you. Go get an agent for yourself. Crazy. So acting for both clients in a single transaction, that's what's considered to be as a dual agency. And in British Columbia, that's when it says it's banned or prohibited with one small exception, when there's no other agents in the area. Okay, so you must stop providing services to either client in the same transaction. I'm just repeating myself. I just want to make sure that you got this. Can continue to represent only one client if what happens? If they both sign this form, okay? And if one doesn't sign, then you have to walk away from both of them. So what do you do with the continuing client? So let's say they both sign the form. And now you have one client that you have to let go, and one is the one that you're going to keep. So the one that you're going to keep is continuing client. So you will have to continue with the duties to that client, which makes sense. The loyalty, right? So that means you're working for his best interest. Conflict of interest, and that's what you just did. You let go one of your clients because of him. Confidentiality, so you keep all his information confidential. Can't disclose it, which makes sense, right? Why you buying, maximum price, your reasoning, why you're getting divorced. None of that information can skip your mouth, right? You can let it go. And of course, the full disclosure. Tell everything that you know about anything that comes your way, right? So that makes sense. Licensee cannot disclose the information from the released client. So the client that you released, you remember the only duty that survives for thousands of years and it doesn't go away is a disclosure, right? So it's confidentiality thing. So you're not allowed to take that information and release it to this guy just because you kept him and says, I released that guy, so let me tell you everything about that guy. You can't do this, okay? So confidential information has to stay confidential, right? What the reasons for buying and selling this guy, the one that you kept, cannot know about the released client. Same thing applies if you reverse it. So what do you do with the released client, right? No longer owns the fiduciary duties, no loyalty, no full disclosure, no vote in the conflict, but you still keep that duty of confidentiality, right? That's the only duty that stays on and it doesn't die. Question 21. Julie is acting as a listing agent for the property in the large city that is owned by her client, George. So she's a listing agent for George's house. Julie also represents a client, Ali, who becomes interested in purchasing George's property. So she has another client, Ali, but he likes George's house. Is there a conflict of interest here? Yes, it is, because there's both of her clients wants to be in the same transaction. And they say, which of the following statement is true regarding the Julie's responsibilities in this scenario? Stories will be always different on the exam. They're always going to change things, but they're always going to test your knowledge, right? So let's see what she has to do. Julie can continue to act for Ali in buying the property and provide George with a referral to another licensee or the brokerage to continue listing his property. Julie thereby avoids the potential conflict of interest and is not required to obtain a written agreement from either client. What is the problem with this option? Is not required to obtain a written agreement from either client? Really? The whole idea, if you have a conflict of interest, they have to sign the form, right? Both of them have to sign it. And if one doesn't sign it, she has to walk away from both of them. So written agreement from not required to obtain the written, that's definitely a false statement. Definitely false. Okay. Option 2, Julie can continue to act for both Ali and George if she obtains a written agreement from both clients at the same time as the potential conflict of interest arises. She can continue to act for both if they sign it. Is that how it works? If they both sign, she keeps only one of them. She has to release one of them. So for that reason, it's definitely false. Julie must cease providing trading services to either client in respect to this transaction in order to avoid the potential conflict of interest. Okay, let's skip this one. Julie continues to represent one of either George or Ali or George if she obtains a written agreement to do so from both clients. Continue to represent one of either, right? If she gets the written agreement to do so from both clients, or which one, 3 or 4? Okay, so definitely number 4 is good because she gets it from both clients, right? But here it says must cease providing trading services to either client. So she has a choice, right? As long as they sign it, then she can keep one, right? I mean, they want us to walk away from our clients, but of course we're not going to do this, right? That's a good question, right? We talked about all the forms, right? So we talked about the conflict of interest, acting for multiple clients, that's 518 forms. So now we're going to talk about notice to seller regarding the assignment terms. So what is the assignment? Assignment is when the buyer, when he buys the property before the completion, he wants to assign it to somebody else, right? So if somebody else instead of the buyer wants to buy it, let's say one of his family members says, look, I need this house more than you. Assign it to me so I can buy it. And he feels bad and he assigns it to his sister, right? And now the sister's supposed to buy it, right? But that's not one of the reasons that people mostly assign it. They usually assign it because sometimes they want to flip it. They found a buyer who offered them more money and they say, perfect, let me assign it to you so you can complete it on the completion date and I get my, extra whatever money you paid me for that assignment. So this is why we used to have a lot of flipping in British Columbia. We have a lot of, people buy it and right away they sell it even before the completion happens for way more money. And the seller would be like, what the heck? I sold it for this much and then you made 300,000 profit on top of this. So there's a lot of complaints. There's a lot of things. And now they're trying to fix it somehow. So they come up with these 2 terms that they added inside of the contract of purchase and sale. Interesting, right? So when the buyer puts an offer, in that contract of purchase and sale, CPS form that we have, the contract, they already written down those 2 terms in here. Okay, and those 2 terms are here to protect the seller's interest. It says if buyer's planning to assign things, this is what will happen. Okay, so the assignment is a transfer of one's contractual rights to the third party, to somebody else. Basically say, hey, my sister will buy it instead of me. Or hey, I'm planning to buy it from my company instead of my personal name. Those are innocent assignments. That's okay, right? Or sometimes people want to make profits, as I said. So licensee must include those 2 standard terms in the offer presented by to the other party for the consideration, right? So basically those terms already printed inside of your contract of purchase and sale, they'll be inside of it, right? But if you know that your buyer is planning to assign it, or if there's anything happens, you have to explain to him about those terms, make sure that he understands. Because if he's trying to flip the property and make a profit before the completion, that's not going to help him, okay? So some buyers, if they're planning to flip it, what they're going to do, they're going to cross those things off, initial it, and then present that offer to the seller. That's what they would do. They would cross them off, okay? And if the seller agrees to cross it off, then that's okay. Then the seller cannot ask for anything. But what is it, those 2 terms, what are they talking about, right? The term that provides that the contract must not be assigned without the written consent. So that means the buyer have to ask in writing the seller if he's okay to assign it. Okay, and the second term, it says the term that provides that you are entitled to any profit as a seller resulting from the assignment of the contracts by the buyer or any subsequent assignee. So basically, this is why it's protection to the seller. It says if the buyer assigns it and if there's any profit to be made before the completion date, that profit will go to the seller. So that's why a lot of buyers, when they put an offer, they usually cross those things off, right? They say, nope, no thank you, I don't want to abide to those terms. And they'll put their initials, and the sellers, if they want to accept their offer, they'll also get the initials in there too, okay? If the buyer instructs you to remove these two terms, you must deliver this form to the seller. Of course, you have to deliver to the seller because a seller also has to initial those two boxes, right? Make sure that he agrees to release the buyer from this. The next one, disclosure of expected remuneration form. So that's your, that's where the money coming from, right? So 5-11.1. So this is again new form. Everything with -1, -2, right? That's something that government add to have more forms for us, okay? So all of the forms have to be submitted to the brokerage and only one has to be submitted to your boss, right? Is your dual agency. Okay, so let's talk about this expected remuneration stuff. So it is a new form, okay? That's why it's point 1, okay? That's something they added recently. And they said now, every time there's an offer is made to the seller, every offer that you receive towards the seller, you as a listing agent have to fill out this form for every single offer. You know how much work that is? But we have to do it, right? It's something that mandatory, right? It's obligation for us to do this. So basically, you have to put it in the form, and this form expected remuneration, something that you might make commission from. Because they're trying to say sellers are sometimes unaware how much money they will have to give you as an agent to sell the house. Right? They're unaware, and that's why don't put it in percentages. Make sure that you put it in a dollar amount. So every single seller clearly can see how much they would pay you if they accept that specific offer. Okay? And that's why it's done for every separate offer that comes in. You have to fill out this form and say, okay, with this offer, you'll pay me this much. With this offer, you'll pay me this much. Okay? So that's what you have to do. Remuneration has to be in dollar amount, not the percentages, because they want the sellers to know exactly how much they have to pay you, right? Must disclose the amount their brokerage will be paid, right? Because what happens, we split the commissions, right? So seller pays the full commission, and that full commission will be split between your brokerage, how much your office makes, how much that brokerage will give you as a chunk of money, and how much the commission that will give to the selling agent that works for the buyer, right? So amount of the brokerage will be paid, the amount of the payment that will be shared with the buyer's brokerage, the amount of the brokerage will keep for representing you as a transaction, right? So basically you have to show them all of those amounts in that paper, right? It doesn't have to be signed by the seller, but it has to be shown to the seller, right? With every single offer. An example says that for all of the offers, one page? No, each offer has its own form. That's what you're supposed to do. Okay, question 22. Which of the following is true with respect to the listing licensee obligation to make a disclosure to her client at the time of the licensee present an offer, right? So your disclosure, so your obligation is to provide that form. So let's see. The licensee may complete the disclosure of expected remuneration payment form with any other form that fulfills the disclosure requirement. So I'll stop right here. Can you use any other form? What do we say about those forms? What do we say about all these forms? That they all prescribed. That means they're not changeable. You can show your expected remuneration in any other forms. You cannot just take a piece of paper and put it in there. So for that reason, option 1 is definitely false, right? Not in any other form. Disclosure must be signed by the seller. Does it have to be? It doesn't have to be signed by the seller. You just have to show it to them. So that's also false. The disclosure must include the detail of how the listing brokerage will split its commission. That's true. With a sorry. Let's read the whole thing. The disclosure must include the detail of how the listing brokerage will split its commission with the listing licensee, and then the remuneration is to be received as money. The remuneration must be expressed in a dollar amount of the disclosure form. So the problem with option 1, because it says in any other form. We got that, right? Because all forms are prescribed. Disclosure must be signed by the seller. It doesn't have to be, just have to be shown to him. But option number 3, the problem in here, it says it has to be, will split its commission with the listing licensee. No, you split the commission not with the listing, is the person who takes the listing, okay? So you don't split the commission, you split with the selling licensee, right? With the selling brokerage. That's where the problem is in there. It's so tricky. That's very tricky. I even caught myself on that one. But if you had to look at option 3 and 4, because they always give you 2 good options, in this case, definitely option 4 is way better because it says it has to be remuneration must be expressed in the dollar amount. They want you to know that because we don't want to confuse people with percentages, you know? They want to know how much they're actually going to pay out of their pocket. Okay, tricky. So true and false statements. The licensee is not required to use the disclosure of expected remuneration payment form if there's only one offer to purchase a property. Just because there's one offer doesn't mean that you don't have to use this form. No, that's definitely a false statement. This is us testing you right now, okay? Because you have to present it with every single offer. What are the remuneration rules? So when it comes to your commissions, what are the rules that comes with this? Interesting. So section 6.1 prohibits a licensee from paying, offering to pay, or agreeing or allowing to be paid remuneration to that person in relation to real estate services if the person is required to be licensed in relation to those services but is not licensed. Oh my gosh. Can they phrase it even harder than this? Come on. Okay, so let me explain you what they just said to you here, okay? So you are prohibited, okay, to pay or offer to pay, basically give a split. You know how sometimes we refer clients, let's say if I live in Kelowna and you live in Vancouver and I don't want to go to Vancouver, I'm not an expert in Vancouver, so let's just pretend, right? Then what would I do? I would refer my client to somebody from Vancouver, right? From Kelowna, I'll refer to Vancouver and I would get some split from that transaction, right? They will have to give me a referral fee. And it could be up to 50%, right? So, but I can do this. But here it says you are prohibited from paying or offering to pay if that person is not licensed. So basically, if somebody is not licensed, you can't offer them to pay something to help your client. So they have to be licensed. That's what they're trying to tell you here. You can pay a remuneration to another agent as long as they are an agent in another province. As long as they have a license, you're allowed to refer people and get paid from this, right? You must refer qualified professionals. So whoever you refer your clients to, you don't want to refer them to somebody that doesn't have qualifications, and you cannot refer just one client or one referral. It has to be at least 3. Why? Because you don't want to be responsible. What if that person is not good? So if you want to refer your client to a mortgage broker, you don't just give one, you give 3 mortgage brokers. If you want to refer them to the inspector, you have to give them at least 3. So this way you are protected. So they cannot blame you and say, oh, but you told me he's a great guy and I think he's shit. Right? So you don't want to get a problem for that. Okay, must submit the disclosure of expected remuneration payment form with every single offer, which we already talked about. And the licensee can be paid his remuneration by the brokerage only. So this is a crucial part. And we talked about this in different chapters, but just remember, if you come to one of those brand new developments and the developer says, look, I'll pay you, just bring me the client and I'll pay you personally. So this way you don't have to worry about the split of your brokerage and you can just cash out on the whole check. If you do this, you lose your license. Okay? It doesn't matter where the money coming from, even if it's a gift from your client says, thank you, here's your Prada bag, or here's your vacation, or here's your dinner, if they're nice to you, right? You're supposed to take those gifts back to your brokerage and only the brokerage will give you them to you, right? So any money that comes to you in any shape or form, it all has to come from your brokerage as a payment only, right? Even if it's a gift. So that's for the exam purposes, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Everything has to come through the brokerage. Okay, so the rules. Section 514 prohibits net listings. Now, what is a net listings? Okay. Which are listings contracts have provided that the licensee commission will be the difference between the price at which the real estate is listed for sale, lease or other disposition, and the actual amount realized on the sale, lease or the other disposition, right? The amount over and above the list price. So the net listing, just in the normal terms, is basically you come into your client and says, look, client, your house is worth $1 million. Don't you agree? And the client says, yeah, I think it's worth $1 million. And he said, if I sell it for more, whatever that more, whatever is more than $1 million, I'll keep that for my commission. I'll keep it as a profit for myself. Can you do that? And if you said yes, you're going to lose your license. Don't do that. So the point is, you can never, ever, ever do the net listing. You're going to say, oh, well, whatever we can list it for, if it goes above that price, I'll keep that profit for myself. And look, you sold for 1.4. So he said, sure, $1 million for you, 400,000 for me. Sounds fair. If you do this, you lose your license within this heartbeat, right? So that's something that prohibited. You're not allowed to do such a thing, right? It is illegal. Why? Because the seller might not be aware how much the property is worth. And he doesn't know. He's not an expert. You are an expert, right? And that's why we always charge a commission from the sale price. So whatever we sold it for, then we'll charge a percentage from that, right? Or a fee from that, whatever that is, right? It could be just a flat fee altogether. But you can never do this, right? So net listings are prohibited. You're not allowed to do such a thing. True or false? Provided that the listing contract states it explicitly, if a licensee is able to secure a higher sale price that a property is listed for, he or she may collect the difference between the listing price and the actual amount realized in the sale. Hopefully you said it's false because that's kind of a point, right? You're not allowed to do the net listing. You're not allowed to collect the profit above the sale price. Because that would be awesome though, for the agent. Okay. The agent may not earn the secret profit. Do you guys agree on that? I hope you said yes. Of course, so you're not allowed to make secret profit. The whole idea of the secret profit, that something goes secretly in your pockets without your brokerage knowing that. As I said, your brokerage have to give you that commission. Everything comes to come, even the gifts have to come through your brokerage, right? So if you don't properly disclose to your principal about the benefit that you will get from your work with the principal that isn't being given to you by them, then you may have to forfeit the profit to the principal. So basically, you're working for the seller, and if the buyer wants to give you a thank you gift, even though he's not your client, but he just wants to say thank you to you, you have to disclose that to your seller. He needs to know who you're working for. You have to give them a full disclosure, and that has to happen. Okay. Question 24. Which of the following statements regarding the licensee remuneration complies with the rules? Right? Which one complies with the rules? Licensee may pay remuneration to the person who provides real estate services in the sale of the property in BC, provided that the person is licensed to provide equivalent real estate services in another jurisdiction. So that is a true statement. As long as he's licensed, you're allowed to pay that remuneration. You're allowed to give that split to somebody. He says, look, I'll send you the client, or you send me the client, you send me the client, and when I sell something, I'll pay you back for that client, right? I'll give you that referral fee. So as long as they're licensed, you're allowed to do such a thing. So one is good. A licensee may receive the commission for recommending a particular home inspector. Okay, watch for this. This is where the problem are, because we used to do this in real life where the buyer's inspectors or the mortgage people, they would give us some type of kickback for sending the clients their way. If you do this now, you're going to lose your license. You're not allowed to receive the commission for recommending things, right? The licensee is not required to use a disclosure of expected remuneration payment form. So that's definitely false because you have to, right? If there's only one offer. So option one is what they want. As long as you know that if somebody sends you that client and you work with that client, you sell it, you're allowed to give a referral back as long as they are licensed, right? So you're allowed to do that. We finished talking about all of the mandatory forms. So all of those forms are not changeable. It cannot be in any other shape or form. And now we're going to talk about non-mandatory forms. So that means you can pretty much basically take a piece of paper and put whatever the information you want and just put it in writing, but it doesn't have to be prescribed form. So your brokerage probably have, each brokerage usually have their own forms for things like that. But basically they're saying it's not prescribed by the BCFSA. It's not prescribed by your boss. So those two forms are not prescribed. Disclosure of remuneration. So you have to, at the end of the transaction, show your client how much money you're going to make from the transaction. Okay, personally, how much you're going to put in your pocket. So that has to be disclosed to them, but there's no mandatory form for this, right? So that means you can use a piece of paper that says, I made this much money from your transaction, right? Disclosure of material latent effects. If there's any problem in the property with the latent effects, again, that's the form that is not prescribed. Most offices, whatever the brokerage you're going to be working for, they'll have their own forms in there though. So disclosure must be made, but these forms do not have to be used for disclosure. So you still have to disclose it, how much money you made, right? Or if there's any material latent effect, you have to disclose it. It's without this form, honestly, in real life, you cannot get paid. If your client doesn't receive that form and he doesn't sign that form, you're not allowed to get your commission. So even though in real life, I always ask my people, I said, when you bought something, did your agent told you how much money they made on this transaction? And most they say, I don't know. I said, they had to disclose it to you somehow. You signed something there, right? So, but anyway, so that's something that has to be done. Even these forms have to be submitted to your brokerage. So all the forms, all the documents that you're going to collect from every single client has to be submitted to your office, right? Not to your boss, not to be CFSA. Okay, so remuneration, what's the goal of this? You want to make sure that your client is aware how much money you're going to make from this transaction, right? The client must understand how the agents are compensated. So he needs to know how much money you make. Helps minimize the conflict of interest, right? On the fiduciary duty to the client and being paid by another person. So he wants to make sure that you don't get paid from any other sources except him, right? Or this transaction, right? Not a mandatory form, I'll say it over and over, right? But must include the source and the amount, right? So where the money coming from and how much. And that is the form. So this is a BCFSA though, but this form doesn't have to be in this form specifically. It could be in any other forms, right? So if you're working with a buyer, remember the rule is, I don't care who you're working for, you still have to tell them how much money you're making from that transaction. He needs to know that too, right? So just remember, it's not just for the sellers, it's for everyone. So the material latent effect form, that's, yeah, in real life, we don't really see this much, right? But if there's some type of, what is the latent effect? Remember what latent is? Patent is something that's visible, something you can see. A latent effect, something that they might discover later, something that is a crack in the foundation, something that is not visible. Even if you hire the inspector, they might miss out on that, right? So who knows? But if the seller is aware, if your seller you're working for, he actually knows that there's an issue, there's this and that, that's where you have to disclose that to the potential buyers and whoever you're working for, right? So it says the defect that renders the real estate dangerous to the occupants unit for habitation, right? Or a defect that would be involve great expense to remedy, right? So if you have a sloping floor and nobody notices that, that's kind of an issue because that's going to be hard to you know, like it's a great expense to the buyers, right? If they're going to buy it, or local government related. So anything to do with the government itself, right? It could be something on the title or whatever that is. It could be a latent effect. If the client instructs a licensee to withhold a disclosure of a material latent effect known to the licensee must refuse to provide services to that client. Your job is to walk away. Remember how we talked about lawful instructions? If they're lawful, then you stay and you work for him. But he tells you not to disclose something like that, then you have to walk away and you have to disclose to the public, basically, right? So yeah, so all the latent effects have to be disclosed if you're aware of them, if somebody knows about them. Okay, so finally the last part, I promise, this is it. So after we finish with this different type of listings, we are done with this chapter. So they want you to know that we have three types of different type of listings. We have an exclusive listing, we have a multiple listing, and then we have an open listing. So out of all of the three, I'm sure you've seen the most is the multiple listing, right? That's the most commonly seen one. And I'm sure you haven't seen the sign that it says exclusive, just like that, okay? So what is this exclusive? It's when you drive by and you see the realtor sign and you go on the MLS system and you don't find any information about it. It says, what's going on here? I see the sign, I see it's for sale, but I can't find it on our MLS system. That means it's exclusive. It's exclusive to one agent only. So, and I'll tell you about the information about this one. Multiple listing, that's the most commonly used one because that's where we all go on the system and we all can see all the listings, all the information, all the past sales about the same house. We can search all that information we need, right? Open listing, this is very also unusual one. When you drive by and you see there's one detached house, not strata, right? But just one house with multiple agent signs from different offices, and you say, what's going on in there? Or how come there's so many agents trying to sell one house? Right? So that's an open listing. So doesn't matter what type of listing. Doesn't matter what type of listing. They all have to have an expiration date. So that means you can't just take any of those listings forever. And so sure, I'll list it for you. Let's see what happens. All of them have to have an expiration date. Is a must. Right? You have to show them when it will expire. So back to the exclusive, as I said, it's exclusive to one specific agent. So yes, you cannot find that information on MLS system. You can't just find it and say, let's see how much, when did it list it, how much did it list it for, right? Like any previous history on that part. So you won't be able to see this, right? So this is when one agent comes to the seller and says, look, come on, I have all the connection in the world. You know, I have all the buyers and I'll sell your property myself. We don't need to list it on MLS. We'll do it exclusive. Give me 2 months and I'll sell it for you. Okay, so multiple listing, the minimum time is 3 months. Okay, everything else is up to negotiation. Because here's the real estate board decide how long do you take the listing for. So MLS is the only one that minimum has to be for 3 months. But let's pretend back in our story that we take an exclusive listing and says, you know what, I'll take it for 2 months. Okay, and I'll bring my buyers and I'll sell it for you. And you try it for a week, you try it for 2 weeks, and none of your buyers decided to buy this property and says, I'll just go on vacation. And you left, right? And while you're on vacation, the seller of the property, the owner of the property, found his own buyer. And he sold it to him during your 2 months that you took that listing with you. But then you were on vacation. He said, okay, he's not here, so I'll do my own job. So the owner sold himself. Does he still have to pay you your commission? Yes or no? Yes, he does. So if it's sold within your time that you exclusively took that listing for, then the owner has to pay you commission no matter how it got sold. So it doesn't matter if you were sunsetting and he was working for you, right? He's still getting your commission. What if the owner found a second agent? While you're on vacation, he found another agent who brought the buyer, and he already paid that agent a commission. Does he still have to give you full commission, even though you haven't done nothing? Yes, he does. So that's exclusive, right? So as a seller of the property, kind of be more careful on that part, because you know now that if you hire somebody, then you might have to end up paying 2 commissions. Now with exclusive listings, you also have to know that the agent who takes that listing, he doesn't have to share his commission with anyone. So he has no obligation. You'll have to personally negotiate with him and say, look, if I have a buyer for your property, would you give me commission? And then you can negotiate, right? It is an exclusive right to sell. So that means that agent has an exclusive right to sell that property. Multiple listing, right? Also, this is the listing that must be have to have an expiration date. They'll do, right? Minimum 3 months. That's the one that goes on MLS system, right? And you can't just take it verbally. This is the one that must be in writing no matter what. So back to the previous one. If the multiple has to be in writing, how about this one? How about the exclusive listing? Is that a must for it to be in writing? What do you think? Yes or no? I mean, in real life, and exam is 2 different things. For the exam, they say it doesn't have to be. The only one that must be in writing is the multiple, okay? The other ones could be just an oral listing. So that's what they say. Okay, and the true copy has been delivered to all of the owners. It has provision that it will expire on a certain date, so that's kind of a must to know this. It also gives you an exclusivity. Interesting. Remember when I told you that the buyers and sellers do not belong to you? It belongs to your brokerage, right? But then they designate you as an agent to sell or to buy, right? So because you are a designated agent, it also gives you that exclusivity. So that means if you sell it, not the whole office of yours getting the commission. It's only you who's getting the commission, and of course your brokerage, right? But that's why it's exclusive right to sell. So that means an agent will get paid from that. Sometimes an example say all the other agents will become sub-agent to the listing. There's no such thing as a sub-agency, so just watch for that word, okay? And yes, the listing has to be distributed to all of the members of the real estate board. So as soon as you're listed on MLS system, everybody will see that information. They will see that's a brand new listing, right? And that's how we sell things. It's really good, handy tool. So question 26, Jason is looking to sell his downtown apartment unit, enters into the multiple listing agreement with Pamela, a licensee at ABC Realty. Which one of the following statement is false, okay? So he's getting into the multiple listing with Pamela, multiple. Jason is free to sign multiple listing agreement with a number of licensees. And I'll stop right now. Because if it's a multiple listing, does it have an exclusivity? Yes, it does. So can he sign this listing with multiple number of licensees? No, he cannot, right? So that for that reason, option 1 is out. The other real estate licensee may assist Pamela in selling Jason's house. Yeah, they can do this, right? So why not? You can hire assistants, or you can have other agents, buyer's agents, who's going to bring buyers to you, and she will share the commission. So that's good. They're asking for the false statement, so option 1 should be the one. All the other ones are true, right? Option 3, why is it true? It says the selling agent approaches Jason with a purchaser, and he completes a contract of purchase and sale without Pamela's assistant. Jason's will still be liable for the commission to Pamela, right? You remember how we talked about the commission has to be given to the listing agent, right? Always has to be given to her. A multiple listing agreement is different from the ordinary exclusive listing because the contract requires the listing be distributed to all of the members of the real estate board. And that is true statement 2 because you cannot, exclusive doesn't spread out to anybody else, right? You have to actually, if you Google it, you won't see this on MLS, right? Exclusive. But when it comes to multiple one, of course, everybody will see this because everybody's using the same system. Okay, so then the last one is the open listing. An open listing, that's something that doesn't happen too often, okay? Usually done on the commercial side. And that's where, on the commercial side, they'll say, look, if I own a commercial unit, I don't want to hire just one agent. Why don't I just hire a few of them and see who will sell it? Okay, and that's what they're referring to, an open listing. So I can hire as many agents as I want. And whoever is the cause of the sale, whoever sells it for me, that's the one who gets the commission. So that makes sense. Why should I hire just one agent if I can hire 20 and see who does a better job? But what's the negative about this stuff? How do you think the agents, if they know that it's not exclusive to them, do you think they'll work hard for that listing? Probably not as hard. They'll be like, yeah, whatever, let's see what I can do, right? But that's about it, right? So that's why not many people do an open listing. Not many agents want to be part of the open listing because there's not much interest for them out of it. But for the exam, they say the owner may employ many numbers of people, agents to find the purchaser. Commission will be paid to the purchaser who is the cause of the sale. And the owner can also sell himself. So if the owner finds his own buyer, then he doesn't have to pay anybody, right? Because it's an open listing, anybody can sell it. But then they say that yes, if you take this open listing, the brokerage still has to give a promise to the owner that they will use their best efforts to try to find that willing and able purchaser. So that means even if you're taking an open listing, you're supposed to do your best. That's what they're trying to tell you. Okay, question 27. Which of the following statements considering the open listing is the false statements? A, B, C, D, use the method of elimination, okay? Under the open listing, the vendor, which is the seller, is free to dispose of the property independently without any liability to the agent. Now that is true. When it comes to open listing, he can sell it himself, and if he does sell it himself, he doesn't have to pay anybody commission. Are they looking for the false statement? So whatever has A, you cross it off. Look how nice that is. So just by method of elimination, I can cross off 1, 2, and 3 because it has an A, and A is a true statement. And guess what? I already know my answer. That was easy. But let's look at option B, C, and D. Okay, under the open listing, commission will only be paid to the listing licensee whether or not he's the effective cause. Definitely false because you have to be the cause of the sale, right? Not whether or not. A seller may try to sell the property by himself, but cannot use the real estate agent. Definitely false, because he can use as many agents as he wants. And under the Real Estate Service Act, the listings, all listings must be in writing. Do you see how they say all listings must be in writing? Which one is a must be in writing? Only the MLS. This is the only one because it goes through your real estate board. That's why it has to be in writing. But the other two, one, an open listing and exclusive listings, they could be just an oral listings, right? It doesn't have to be in writing. Okay. So last part is about the MLS itself. If they ask you a question about what multiple listing system is, right? MLS, what is it? It's the site. It's just a website that pulls together all the information on all of the listings with the focus on the listings, right? So topics with the real estate focuses on the listings, provides the current inventory of the available properties and the history of the sales, okay? So that is a new definition that we start coming up with, but it's the same thing. It's the site that pulls information about the listings. It's the site that pulls the information on all of the inventory of the properties and the history of the sales. Common sense, right? Who manages that? It's done through your mothers, through your real estate board, right? So they give you the access to this. If you do some wrongful actions, they take it away from you. Whatever you put in the MLS must be what? It has to be in writing, right? You can't just verbally pull them up and say, come on, I have a new listing here, right? And must be distributed to all of the members of the real estate board. So everything is a common sense. So last question, now we're done. Okay, question 28. Which of the following statements regarding the multiple listing services is true? Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. MLS website focuses on the industry issues, trends, and financing. Nope, that's definitely not what they focus on. When a property is listed for sale, the MLS website is the only place that lists information that can be obtained. The only place, really? I thought we can find this information on all the other, like realtor.ca, rev.ca. There's a lot of other places you can find information, even other agents' websites. The multiple MLS website allows trading services representation to generate the most common forms and contracts. So you do have web forms site that is different from the MLS, right? So it's a totally different link, right, for your web forms. So that's not where you get your web forms. MLS is just for the listings, right? And it's a local real estate board managed the listings information for the properties listed on MLS in the geographical area. However, the accuracy of the information is the responsibility of the licensee, of course. So they try to tell you that whatever you do, whatever you put on that MLS, you will be responsible for that. So if you put the house has 10,000 square foot, and if it only has 8 at the end, you will be responsible for that mistake, right? So that's why when the seller gives us any information, you cannot rely on it unless there's a proof to that. Otherwise, you don't want to put it on MLS because it's in writing, right? So we finally finished. I know it's been a very long chapter. I even lost my voice, but I'm sure you're going to do well on this because that is something that is usable, right? And I like this chapter. So do your quizzes. Get through all the forms that will be attached in this chapter for you so you can see them. You don't have to print them, right? Just like if some people want to see those forms that you're going to be dealing with, it's going to be right here for you, okay? And I will see you in the next chapter.